They're live.
Welcome everyone to our 5th annual symposium. Thanks for joining us as we wait for people to join. Let's see if we can do an icebreaker and people can enter their icebreaker into the chat.
We can move to the next slide
Yeah,
for the
great.
icebreaker.
There we go.
There we go. Awesome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for entering the icebreakers. We'll get started in a little bit, so if you can go ahead and put in the chat the icebreaker here, please share a time we fit in a group when you felt most inspired. And I see a couple people sharing, so thank you. Someone was in a drum club. That's exciting. Thank you for sharing. As we're reading, we'll be starting in just a second.
For those of you who have joined over the past minute, we're taking a couple minutes to answer the icebreaker on the screen. You can type in your responses to the chat and we'll begin shortly. It's amazing to see where inspiration comes from. I'm seeing, listening sessions with community partners, participating in restorative practice trainings. I love the one about anytime you're with CSI team. The Flourish Foundation Healing Centered Engagement Groups.
I love this one with my open water swimming group for an early morning sunrise swim. I love that. It's great.
Yeah, it would be a very cold day right now.
Thank you all for entering in the chat. It's actually very inspiring to read all of these.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Carol. We have about 2 more minutes and we'll get this thing started.
If you have a chance, I would encourage people to go through the chat to look at some of the places and ways others are inspired. There's a tremendous amount of appreciation and support from colleagues and teams, which is nice because COVID really was very isolating. So it's nice to see that people draw inspiration and support from their teams and colleagues. Well, it looks like the number of participants joining has slowed. So I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today for our 5th annual symposium. I'm Robert Bird. I'm the Deputy Director for Prevention here at LA County Department of Mental Health. And I am accompanied by my co-MC today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bird. My name is Dr. LaCoe Dickerson. I'm currently the interim project director for our Human Trafficking Youth Prevention Education Program here at LACOE. I'm so excited to be here today. It's such an honor. We have such a great agenda for the day, so I'm really, really excited. Dr. Bird, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks so much. Before we begin, I'd like to start with some housekeeping items. Please note that the presentation is being recorded and it will be made available through LACOE and DMH websites. The Q&A function will be available throughout the entire symposium, but the chat will be disabled while our speakers are on so that speakers are not distracted by pop-ups. 5 years ago, the partnership between LA County Department of Mental Health and LA County Office of Education was established and together embarked on a journey with the Community Schools Initiative. At that time, no one could predict we were going to be faced with a pandemic, and the challenges and impact the pandemic would have on the two departments as we moved toward a more collaborative relationship than ever because of the pandemic. This partnership allowed both teams to think outside the box to support our students in LA County during one of the most difficult times our nation, actually our world, has experienced. Almost 3 years later, we're still, sweeping up and tidying up many of the challenges that were brought on and exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. However, as a result of the pandemic, our partnership has become stronger than we could have imagined and has brought many opportunities for growth and collaborative work. It's allowed us to work more efficiently and empathically to help the youth throughout LA County. As a result, we're here today hosting our 5th annual school symposium. Dr. Dickerson.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you all, thank you again for being here. Just want to remind you that throughout the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions in the chat. Our team will be answering and reviewing the questions as soon as they can, but we do kindly ask that you keep your questions for the speakers towards the end of their presentation. This will make it a little easier for us to bring them up to the speaker and ensure that all of the time and topics that they have covered, they have the allotted time. So again, thank you for being here today. And Dr. Burtz, back to you.
So thank you. Thank you so much. It's my great pleasure to introduce LA County Department of Mental Health's Interim Director, Dr. Lisa Wong. Like me, this is Dr. Wong's first appearance at the annual symposium in her new role. Prior to her appointment as our interim director, Dr. Wong was DMH's Senior Deputy Director, overseeing the department's clinical programs and community-based services over a wide range of settings throughout LA County. Concurrently, Dr. Wong was operating as the chief for our full service partnership program reimagining and redesign. Our FSP, or full service partnership program, is an intensive 24/7 outpatient program that really is aimed at helping our most at-risk clients. Dr. Wong is a lifelong advocate for vulnerable and underserved populations and has an incredibly rich clinical acumen forged through more than 2 decades of work with the most vulnerable and high-risk individuals in the Skid Row area. She is kind, compassionate, open-minded, a fantastic leader, and it truly is my great honor to welcome her here today. Dr. Wong, the floor is yours. We're waiting for Dr. Wong to join. It looks like she may not be here, which is sad. She missed all the great things I said, but she should be joining us in a minute.
Would it be okay for us to move forward and then go back? Is that okay for us to do, or do you want to? Well, it's 9:15. She's coming, right? We can wait.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't we pivot to Dr. Eduardo? Dr. Dickerson.
Okay, so I get to have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Eduardo. And so Dr. Eduardo was appointed Los Angeles County Superintendent of School by the County Board of Supervisors in 2016. As County Superintendent, Dr. Eduardo oversees 80 school districts that serve approximately 1.4 million students, providing leadership and support to superintendents and administrators countywide. Dr. Eduardo has dedicated her career to advocating for equity and inclusion in education, working to ensure that every student has access to high quality education opportunities. She holds a master's degree in social work and a doctorate from UCLA. She currently serves as president of the California County Superintendent's Educational Service Association, and this role places her in a unique position to elevate our LA County's students' needs to our state and federal departments and legislators. She is dedicated, caring, a fierce leader, and it is just with great pleasure that and gratitude that I get to welcome her here today. Dr. Eduardo, thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Dickerson, for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Dr. Bird. And thank you for everybody who's joined us for our 5th symposium. This is really, really exciting. You know, we've all gone through a lot during this pandemic. There's a lot of trauma that people have experienced, whether it's the pandemic, you know, civil unrest, national disasters, mass shootings. I mean, you name it. We've all been through a lot together, and it really is a time for us to heal collectively and come together and figure out how we can best support our schools, our students, our families, our employees. You know, so many of our students have experienced a tremendous amount of loss and grief. Many of their lives were disrupted during the pandemic, and you know, they just want more supports for their overall well-being. We talk to students all the time. I have a student advisory group, and one of the #1 priorities that they keep bringing up is they want more well-being, more mental health, more opportunities to connect with their peers and to be supported by the adults around them. And school is the perfect place to do that. You know, not only our students, you know, we also talk to our superintendents. As was mentioned, we have 80 school districts in LA County, 80 superintendents, and we surveyed all 80 of them. Actually, 76 out of the 80 responded when we were talking to them and asking them questions about the mental health needs of their students and their employees. And one, you know, there were 3 top areas that came up when we talked about student mental health challenges. The first one was stress and anxiety. The second was depression, and the third was suicidal ideation. So all 3 very serious concerns that students have brought up, that staff at schools have brought up, and have said we really need to have more support in these 3 areas. They also told us that their 3 top district priorities are: 1, increasing people that are trained and qualified to be able to provide the mental health services in our schools. We all know there's a shortage in staffing, and even finding people that are licensed or credentialed and able to come to our schools and provide services is lacking. So they want to increase the number of people that are trained and qualified and able to support our students. There's a real preference on early and ongoing identification, right? We don't want to wait until students are in high school or students have experienced so much trauma that they're just not able to learn and do well in school. So we want to be able to identify our students early on when they're having some challenges. Well, we also found out it's not just our students that need support. We've seen a huge increase in school district employees that are utilizing our employee assistance program for services, 163% increase since 2019. So when I'm talking about any school district employee, it could be a teacher, a bus driver, it could be a superintendent or another administrator. We've seen a huge increase, and these are some of the things that they're reaching out for us on. Again, a huge increase in suicidal ideation in our adults. And think about that, you know, if you have teachers and other employees that are working with children at school that are struggling with their own mental health issues, the impact that that has on our classrooms and our school campuses. So this increase certainly speaks to the need for providing services to support our employees. The need in our schools and in our communities is real, and we're really feeling it. About 40% of employees reach out with emotional concerns related to anxiety, depression, or other mental health concerns. So for those people, we provide, there's a phone number that they can call for immediate support, or they can get short-term counseling in person or by Zoom. And we're really seeing a huge increase, and we're glad that our employees are reaching out, but we need to be prepared and ready to support them. You know, one of the things that we're hoping for in LA County is that we really prioritize the needs of our students and our staff well-being. And part of that is that LACOE has expanded access to those school district employees, as I mentioned, through our e-services. So actually what we did is we used our COVID relief one-time funding to make sure that all 80 of our districts have access for their employees to get these type of support services, counseling services through 2024 at no cost to the school district. So that's a really, big step. And a few weeks ago, we announced a historic partnership between LA Care, HealthNet, the LA County Department of Mental Health, and Hazel Health, that LACOE is working with all of them to make sure that every student in LA County has access to telehealth mental health counseling at no cost to the school districts, no cost to their students, and no cost to their families through 2024. So this is huge, because as we know, we don't have enough staffing in our schools. So to have this additional option where students can use telehealth and get support from a counselor immediately for short-term counseling is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We know that by having these types of services, it's going to increase access to care for our students and our staff. It's going to build a longer-term infrastructure. These infrastructures are so necessary. So I'm talking about the infrastructure between DMH, between our managed care providers, to make sure that, even long-term into the future, we're all working together and have an infrastructure in place to better meet the needs of our students. And it also supports early intervention. Again, we talk about the need to identify students early and have the services that we can offer them early. Part of this work that I'm really proud of is our community schools work that has been in place now for a few years. This work in community schools has expanded significantly. We are super fortunate. The state has invested about $18 billion to support the implementation and the expansion of community schools in California. If you didn't hear me, it's $18 billion. These are historic investments that we've never seen before for mental health in education. LACOE was actually selected as one of 8 regional technical assistance centers that is going to support the expansion of community schools. So we're working with all 80 of our districts and helping them so that they can have a community school program model in their schools. LA County received a total of $18 million as part of the California Community Schools Partnership Program. So for cohort 1, we have 63 school sites that received implementation grants, and 9 districts received planning grants. We are really fortunate that we started the Community School Initiative pilot before the pandemic. We were actually highlighted as a best practice in working with partners at schools to support our students and families. So this is really exciting that we're going to continue to expand. We're going to continue to support more districts that will be able to work with the partners in their school area to help ensure that we have whatever services are needed to better support our students. Because as educators, we know that if children are not physically and emotionally healthy, they're not going to learn. So we need to remove whatever barriers are preventing our children from being successful at school. And a big part of that is making sure that we're identifying them early and that we have the resources and supports to meet their needs. And School districts cannot do this work alone. You know, it's so important that we're developing these partnerships, not just developing, but strengthening and enhancing these partnerships, because no one agency can do this work alone, and certainly not educational settings. We need to work, and we are so happy and grateful for the partnerships that we have with the Department of Mental Health, with UCLA, with the managed care providers, with Hazel Health, with our parents and our students, and everybody coming together to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and that we have a clear plan in place and how we're going to best support our students, our families, and our employees so our children can thrive. We have a lot of work to do on behalf of our children and families. We're going to meet them where they are, and we're going to lift them to wherever they need to go so that they can find success. And I just have a lot of gratitude, as I said, for all of our partners, and gratitude for all of you who are participating today. We're going to continue to work together, and it's only going to get better for the future of our students. So thank you, everyone who's participating, and I'll turn it back over to our host.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eduardo. I am genuinely so appreciative of the collaboration and partnership that we have with you and LACOE at large. So demonstrating the flexibility that we've all honed during the past 3 years, I want to pivot back to Dr. Wong, our compassionate visionary, who is leading the Department of Mental Health. Dr. Wong.
Thank you, Dr. Bird. So good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa Wong, Interim Director of LA County Department of Mental Health, and it's such a pleasure to be with you today at the 5th Annual School and Community Symposium. As Dr. Eduardo mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic and other events in our society have taken such a huge toll on our school community. As a result, school staff, school partners, and community mental health agencies have been called to action to support our youth, all while dealing with their own stressors and the ongoing effects of the pandemic, as well as social justice issues throughout our country. School staff have been tremendous advocates for the overall well-being of their students, creating new supports for students and applying for several state opportunities to bring additional resources to school campuses, such as Community Schools Grant and SB HIP. The theme for this year's symposium is collective healing, and it aims to uplift and support our school community, helpers, and staff. Acknowledging experiences, building community, and leading with empathy and compassion are at the heart of collective healing. This year's speakers will highlight these elements and share their perspectives on this topic. Coming together in these times to connect, reflect, and collectively heal is essential. And it's also important for us to recognize the amazing work that has been done. We all have a role to play in this process of healing. We need to listen to each other, validate, normalize each other's experiences and feelings, and come together as a community. We hope this year's symposium will highlight the importance of connection and healing. We forge ahead with heart, determination, compassion, and new insights, committed to creating a truly connected county that supports the well-being of everyone in our school communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. I want to again thank everyone for being here with us today. We understand that people have very busy schedules and could be doing any number of things, but you've carved out time to be here with us to really focus on the work we're doing with children and youth within our schools. And we are so thankful for that. Over the course of today, you'll hear from our wonderful speakers, many of them educators like yourselves, all of them individuals with a passion for youth mental health and well-being. The vision of this year's symposium is to promote creative healing, and doing so with the goal of uplifting and supporting our school communities. Acknowledging experiences, building community, and leading with empathy and compassion are at the heart of our collective healing. And today we're joined by our keynote speaker, Dr. Jin Wright, who has done amazing work addressing the issues that face America's youth, with calls to action to create meaningful transformation. Dr. Ginwright is one of the nation's leading innovators and thought leaders on African-American youth, youth activism, and youth development. His work has gained nationwide recognition, and he has been awarded many prestigious awards, including the Fulbright Senior Specialist Award from the State Department for his outstanding research and work with urban youth. Dr. Ginwright is the founder and chief executive officer of Flourish Agenda, Inc., a national nonprofit consulting firm whose mission is to design strategies that unlock the power of healing and engage youth of color and adult allies in transforming their schools and communities. He also recently accepted a position with Harvard Graduate School of Education as the Jerome T. Murphy Endowed Chair. Today, Dr. Ginwright will help us focus on the importance of collective healing and highlight elements of this important topic. Without further delay, let us all welcome Dr. Ginwright.
Thank you, Dr. Bird, and thanks to the LA County Department of Mental Health and the LA Department of Education. It is a pleasure and honor to be here and to share these ideas with you. We all know that youth mental health is perhaps one of the most significant issues that we're facing today in schools and in communities and in our families. We also know that young people's behavioral and mental health is creating significant challenges with learning and with their own growth and development in our nonprofit organizations. And we also know that the mental health challenge that we face is documented by many national organizations such as the National Association of Psychologists and the National Association of Psychiatry, that the mental health, the pipeline to support young people with their mental health needs is thin and frail. And it requires more and more innovative thinking and experience and compassionate engagement with our educational workforce to really begin to move the needle on the mental health issues that young people are facing. But we also know that it's not just the young people, right? That the issues that young people are navigating and challenging, those issues also face the adults in schools. We also know that the adults have significant challenges with mental health in our teacher workforce and our education workforce. And so the question is, how do we respond to the issue of behavioral and mental health in our schools? What kinds of systems of support are necessary to support the well-being of our teaching and our educational workforce? I think if we're not asking that question as educational leaders, then we're probably solving for the wrong problem. So I'm excited to be able to share with you today some of my own thinking and experience about some steps that we could take to really to really move the needle or begin to change the conditions in our schools and in our communities relevant to our mental health. But I'd like to start with a small story, as I always do, and some of you may have heard this story before, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, because I'm going to talk to you like you in my living room, y'all. So I'm going to be a little bit off the cuff here, but I think that the story helps to set the stage and helps evoke your imagination about both the condition that we're facing and the strategy that I think we need to begin to adopt in our own personal practices and in our professional practices. So if you've heard this story before, my apologies, but I think it sets the stage. This story began about 8 years ago. I received an email from a prison not far from my home. And the email said, there's a small group of men in this prison that are reading one of your books called Black Youth Rising, about Black young people in Oakland. We'd love it, Dr. Ginwright, if you could come out to the prison. And I kind of scratched my head and tried to wonder whether or not I was going to take the invitation. And I decided to go out to the prison the next week. When I arrived at the prison, they said the group of men, the small group of men in their reading group are waiting for me in the cafeteria. And in order for me to get to the cafeteria, I had to follow the instructions that each of the correctional officers would give me as I went to the location in the prison. So the first correctional officer said, Dr. Jenright, there are colored lines on the floor. Just look at the colored lines. And the first one is, I want you to take follow the red line all the way to the end of the corridor where you'll be met by another correctional officer. So I looked on the floor. There's a bunch of colored lines. And so I just followed the red one. It went all the way to the end of the hallway where that door opened, and I walked through it and it shut behind me. Boom. And then there was another correctional officer there. Dr. Jenright, we're glad you're here. I know that you're here. You're trying to get to the cafeteria so that you can, talk to the men that are waiting for you. Just follow the green line all the way to the end of this hallway, and you'll be near the cafeteria. I looked on the floor. I followed the green line all the way to the end of that corridor where I was met with another door. That door opened, and I walked through it, and it shut behind me. Boom. There was another correctional officer there, and she said, Dr. Jenright, you're almost to the cafeteria. Just follow the blue line all the way around to the end of this hallway, and you'll be near the cafeteria. So I did the same. I followed the blue line all the way around. I was met with another door, and that door opened, and I walked through it, and it shut behind me. Boom. Now, I'm not sure if anyone who hears my voice now has ever been to a prison. I'm not sure if you've ever walked those colored lines. But by the time that third door shut, something shifted inside of me, y'all. Like I began to feel the sense of incarceration. I began to feel the sense of being closed. And I began to imagine that those men that I was about to talk to, that they couldn't feel the sun on their face, that they couldn't hug their children, that they couldn't smell, the fresh rain after it rains on grass, right? That there's things that I took for granted that they would never, or they're not able to experience. And so at that moment, when that third door shut, something shifted inside of me and my humanity began to grow. And I began to become really insecure. Like, what am I gonna tell these men who are incarcerated? I'm not gonna talk to them about my research. I'm not gonna talk to them about my theory of whatever. I don't know what I'm gonna talk to them about. So by the time they took me in front of the two doors that opened to the cafeteria, I actually didn't have anything to say to this group of men who were reading my book. But I was standing in front of those two doors, and they opened those two doors, and I'll never forget, I had expected a group of about 10 to 15 men who were reading my book. And as I opened the doors, I was shocked at what I saw. Instead of 10 to 15 men waiting for me, it was an entire cafeteria, about 250 men, all in their orange jumpsuits, waiting for me. And I was like, whoa, I wish y'all would have told me that, right? You should have said, it's not gonna be the reading group, it's gonna be the entire prison. But anyway, they came up to me kind of one by one. The first man was like, hey man, my name is Greg, Dr. Jenright. I'm glad you're here, man. We can't wait to hear what you gotta say. I've been in here since 1989. Another man came up to me. Hey, Dr. G, we're glad you're here, man. My name is Chris, brother. I've been here since 1990. And one by one, they kind of came, shook my hand, told me their first name and the year they had entered that prison. And each time they did, I became more and more insecure. Like, wow, man, what am I going to say to them? So by the time I got up to the stage, I had completely disregarded my paper whatever I was going to say to them. And I just began to talk to them, y'all, from my heart. I began to talk to them about the concerns I have of my aging parents. At the time I just shared with them my concerns of raising a 6'3" African-American 16-year-old boy in Oakland, California, because of my fear of the police and how they see my son. And I just talked to them. I didn't talk to them about my own theories. I just talked to them from my heart about what I believed made a difference. And there's one thing I did tell them. I said that, you know, no matter what you did to get here, there's always a possibility for you to heal and for you to heal others. And that as long as you have the space of healing, that there's practices that you can engage in that somehow can make it better in your own behavioral and mental health, that there's always a possibility to heal. And you could always heal yourself and heal others. And then my time was up, right? My time was up. And so the correctional officers came and got me off the stage, and they were walking me to the exit of the cafeteria when I heard this loud booming voice behind me, "Hey, Dr. G." And I turned around as this tall brother, I was looking up at him. He said, "Dr. G, man, I just want to tell you, man, you know, those words you share really touched me, man. They made it better for me, man. And I just want to let you know, I just want to thank you for coming." And I said, "Hey, man, what's your name? I appreciate the words." And then he said, "No, man, I really want you to hear me, man. Like what you said about healing, it really touched me, man, because, you know, it's hard living in a place like this. You know, I got in a fight a few months ago and they cut me in the face." And he leaned down and I could see a scar that was healing in his face. And he said, "Because I'm so tall, you know, I'm big, man. People think that I'm a threat, man. Everybody tries to challenge me, man. You know, just because I'm born in this body, man, I'm really a teddy bear, bruh. I don't really want to be here, but people always try to challenge me." And I said, "Man, I'm so sorry to hear that, brother. I'm so sorry." And then he said that, you know, there's something, you said there's always a way to heal. Man, there's something that I do every day that allows for me to heal. And I'm like, "Wow, man, tell me what you do." And so he quickly reached into his pocket and I was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I kind of jumped, and the correctional officer said, "No, it's cool, man." And I said, "What is it that you do?" And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out this little bottle. He opened it and he blew bubbles. And the bubbles floated over my head. And my first thought was, did this big, tall brother just blow bubbles in my face in prison? That was a joke. Y'all supposed to laugh at that. But that was what I thought. I'm like, did he just blow bubbles in my face? And then he said, "Man, I blow these bubbles, man, because it reminds me when I was a child. My daddy used to take me to the park and we used to blow bubbles, man. My daddy used to put me on the swing and we would walk and he would blow bubbles. So when I blow these bubbles, it heals me. And it makes it possible for me to be in a place, a difficult place like this. It makes me have a sense of serenity. It's my sanctuary in a difficult situation." And when he said that, I really began to think about our own bubble stories and our own practices in difficult contexts and situations. You can go to the slide deck. Like, what are our bubble stories? And how do we practice a sense of well-being and create a sense of sanctuary space in difficult settings that we're working in right now? How are we thinking about creating our own sense of well-being? And so today, I'm not going to specifically talk to you about strategies for the mental health of your students, while important, but I hope to give you some thinking and some strategies about your mental health, because we know that your mental health and your behavioral and mental health is important if you are to show up in powerful ways to create that sanctuary space in your school, your classroom, and in your district for young people. Someone told me, how am I supposed to heal somebody if I'm wounded? And so COVID and all of the other things that I'll talk about today, while they are directed at supporting young people, they're focused on your well-being and your mental health. And hopefully these comments will encourage your district and your county and your community partners to implement these practices, not to change overnight the behavioral and mental health, but to create a condition where mental and behavioral health is more possible in a difficult setting. And so I began to wonder, as I left the prison that night, what are we doing in our communities to create the sense of behavioral and mental health? You could go to the, I have the clicker. Sorry, guys. So this is live stuff, right? So I'm a little bit, anyway, don't worry about it. Stick with the script, Dr. J. Wright. So I wrote the book, The Four Pivots, as a roadmap for our behavioral and mental health and well-being. That is, how are we integrating practices in ways that sustain ourselves, but also forward and advance our understanding of justice? And my concern is that I've been so involved with school change, school transformation, school reform, district reform, all the kinds of challenges, that's social emotional learning. I've been involved with DEI strategies around this country. And the one thing that I know that I've seen that is missing is that these processes that I've seen in school districts and in schools and even in classrooms are so technical, right? And we remember that our first response to COVID, even in our reopening, was largely technical. That is, how are we going to think about the school day schedule? How are we going to think about where to place the desk? How are we going to think about isolation? There were technical responses to this issue. And so I believe that what is missing is not a technical strategy, but it is our own transformation, and it is our own reflection and the spaces that we create in our schools and our communities to have that sense of reflection and space for our own healing. And so the four pivots allow us to begin to walk and create those conditions. But the question is, as my mother always asked the right question when I began to write a book, I said, Mom, I'm gonna write this book. It's gonna be about the things we need to change. And she said, well, why do we need to pivot? From what? What do we need to pivot from? My mom has a brilliant way of just asking the right question at the right time. And so we all know that why we need to pivot, because Dr. Bird and Dr. Dickerson has already shared with us the conditions that we are assaulted with or that we are immersed in our society. We see, unfortunately, and I regret that I say this every time I do these presentations, that school shootings, we have not solved that. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see that until we have robust, courageous legislation around gun control. We also see that there is assault on Asian lives, and particularly around the country, and here in California, and an assault on Black lives and the movements for the dignity of Black lives. And we see the challenges that have happened with Mr. Nichols and Mr. Floyd, that these conditions all have created greater forms of behavioral and mental health for our young people and for us. A recent report that came out in the New York Times articulates and shows us that young people's mental health is increasing while the supply and the availability of mental health therapists are very thin and frail. But we also know that these conditions create our own sort of toxicity for adults, that when we see these mass shootings, when we see what happened with Mr. Nichols, that we become numb and it almost becomes normalized. Some of you, including myself, had to decide whether or not we were going to watch the video of what happens to Mr. Nichols. We actually had to ask ourselves that question. I'm not going to ask what you decided to do, but you had to wrestle with it. Some of you chose to click it and you watched the video. Some of us said, I don't want to see it. But the fact that we had to wrestle with it suggests to us that even watching that video creates a sense of trauma and a sense of disruption on our normal behavioral and mental health. So the research suggests that we cannot consider this condition a post-event. In my graduate class, we were talking about the condition. Everybody's familiar with the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But my graduate students reframed the post-traumatic stress disorder because one of my graduate students that worked in a neighborhood in San Francisco, Bayview Hunters Point, worked in a community-based organization in a school, said that my young people experienced trauma and my staff experienced trauma last week, and they may experience it next week, and they may experience it next month, Dr. Jen, right? So tell me what's post about that. And in that class, we began to interrogate the concept and the notion of post-traumatic stress disorder, and we began to use the term persistent traumatic stress environment. Some of you are also familiar with the research on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And we know from research that there's also another ACEs, which is called adverse community environment. So we know that the environment, and it is not the disease itself, that stress, while it exists in the individual, such as ACEs or such as PTSD, it is also in the environment, as I just showed you from what we see in our community, in our nation, in our communities, in our schools. So persistent traumatic stress environment and adverse community environment suggests that there's a persistentness that creates ongoing stress in our communities and neighborhoods, as well as the issue is not only in our psychology. That is, if we fix our minds, we provide the mental health supports, we de-escalate, right? The environment is still there. So this suggests that school leaders, school principals have to broaden our understanding of how to respond to this overwhelming saturation of stress and trauma. A researcher, James Gabarino, I love his research that talks about that gives us another frame of how we use and think about the result of exposure to persistent traumatic stress environments. And he calls it social toxicity. In other words, that we know that there are physical toxins, like you see this room, like imagine if this were your living room or your office, right? There's mold on the ceiling, there's asbestos. If you breathe that in every day, eventually those physical toxins would make you sick. And that if you don't get healed from that physical toxin, that it can actually become lethal. You start coughing or you get a fever. Well, James Gabarino says that just like there are physical toxins in our environment, there are also social equivalents to physical toxins. Well, his research suggests that social equivalents to physical toxins are things like uncertainty, fear, anxiety, shame, silencing, isolation. Now, all of these things we know, particularly isolation, are very present in our environment. We know that from COVID. But where are the tools that we have? What are the tools that we have to respond to those conditions? And Gabarino's research suggests that that oftentimes exposure to social toxicity, we diagnose as bad behavior, or we misdiagnose as bad behavior, and then we respond to that with discipline, if we see that with young people. Or we could see that exposure in adults, that we could see that as, we see the same kind of conditions with adults that show up in our schools and our school communities. So if we are all exposed to social toxicity, let's look at, for a really quick example of how it affects us and how it shapes our reality in working in school communities. Hopefully you could see this. This is, I like to call her Mia. And Mia is a teacher. Mia is a mental health professional. Mia is an arts educator. Mia is a principal that wants to support young people in their schools and communities. But Mia works in a socially toxic environment. And that social toxicity is created by racism and patriarchy and homophobia. And they create these rain clouds that make it difficult for Mia. Now, these rain clouds rain down on Mia, but they're different kinds of rain clouds. This kind of rain doesn't just get on top of Mia, but it gets inside of Mia. And that sense of toxicity from white supremacy, that toxicity from heterosexism, that toxicity from othering and poverty gets inside of Mia, and it creates a toxic, it becomes eroding at Mia's sense of well-being. And it doesn't just have an impact on Mia at the individual level. It also has an impact at on Mia's relationships with those that she works with and the young people that she tries to support. But it doesn't stop there. That toxicity also has an impact on the school district or the county office, the infrastructure where Mia works. And that toxicity shapes the values, the practices, and the policies of that institution. And then the institution itself produces its own form of toxicity that goes back out into society, and then it reproduces itself. And so what we have then is this cycle of exposure to social toxicity at the individual, interpersonal, and institutional level that oftentimes goes undiagnosed, that makes it difficult. Now, this is why it's challenging to only address one area of the system, y'all. That means we can provide supports to the individual, but if we don't do anything to the values and policies of the institution, then it doesn't really have the kind of impact that's necessary. Or we could focus on changing the relationships at the interpersonal level, but if we don't focus on individual supports, it makes it more difficult. And this is why any support around thinking about well-being has to be thinking about it simultaneously at three levels. What does it mean for the individual? What does it mean for the teams or the interpersonal relationships in that institution? And what does it mean for the institution itself? And hopefully I'll have a chance to give you some examples where we could talk about ways that we could, examples that can help you think more specifically. But I'm gonna focus on four ways that we could think about shifting and creating spaces of well-being. And in the book, The Four Pivots, I talk about how we need to pivot and make these changes so that we can create well-being for ourselves, for our personal and professional lives. Now, I call it a pivot. I like basketball, but this is not just a basketball picture, y'all. I was just trying to come up with a picture that represents what a pivot is. And a pivot is not a change. It is not a complete abandonment of what we're doing. A pivot means that you just make a subtle, from where you are, you make a subtle shift. And over time, that shift gets you to an entirely different place, right? It means that you take a subtle change in direction, but over time, if that subtle change in direction leads you to an entirely different place. So that's what these pivots are. And I'm going to name the four pivots, and then I want to talk to you about what those pivots are. The first pivot is a pivot from a lens on how we see the world to a mirror, from a lens to a mirror. And I'm going to talk about what that is. The second pivot is a pivot from transactional relationships to transformative relationships. The third pivot is a pivot on only focusing on problems solving to possibility creating. And the final and last pivot is a pivot from hustle to flow. Now, these are the pivots that we could practice individually, you could practice in your classroom, and you could practice as a district, and you could practice as a county to be able to create the conditions for well-being that matter for our young people. So what do I mean by a pivot from lens to mirror? Much of our thinking about well-being is largely through a lens, y'all. Now, my mama would really get upset if she heard me call y'all, right? So anyway, let me stay focused. Lens, right? A lens is an analysis. It gives us the statistics, it gives us the research, it gives us the kind of intellectual chops to understand the mental health condition that we face in our schools and communities, and that is important. But a mirror is different. A mirror is a reflection of how it affects us. Mirror work allows us to do the kind of deeper self-reflection that allows us to ask about what do I need to heal from? What kinds of mental health supports do I need? what kinds of questions do I need to ask? Just think quickly as an example, in your next staff meeting with your team, your teachers, your administrators, Lynn's work is, okay, let's talk about the mental health supports that partnerships we need in our district or our county and our partners. But mirror work would say, how are you doing? For everybody go around and talk about what are you most excited about for this week? What are you most, what brings you, the way that you started today's meeting with a sense of aspiration is mirror work. What most concerns you? What problem are you trying to solve? Here's a good mirror question. What conversation have you been avoiding and why? You do that in a staff meeting, right? Every staff meeting, you begin to shift from only thinking about lens and behavioral health and mental health to actually centering behavioral mental health in your own space. But most of us think about mirror work like this. How am I supposed to lose weight if everything tastes good? In other words, I can't do mirror work. It's too hard. I don't have time, or mirror work is too hard, and nobody else is doing it. How am I supposed to do mirror work in my organization or my school when I don't have the time or people don't believe it's important, right? In other words, there's always reasons to not practice mirror work, but we know from the research, as well as my own practice and working in this space, that mirror work is one of the most important ingredients that begins to cultivate empathy, that begins to cultivate shared understanding, and begins to create a sense of well-being in a team, because now I can hear you not in your role as a professional, but I can hear what you're dealing with as a human being. Does this make sense? And so, and as we think about these pivots in the book, I give you a number of examples, both in my personal life, but also in professional, where organizations and people are struggling and using mirror work to really create the conditions for well-being for their young people. Here's a question you might want to consider in thinking about mirror work questions, and that is, who do I have to become the outcome that I want? What kind of changes do I need to make as a result of the kind of outcomes that I want to see in my school, my classroom, or my organization? The next pivot is a pivot from transactional to transformative relationships. And we know that transactional relationships are the kind of relationships that are a function of our titles. Transactional relationship says that I am the principal, you are the student. I am the superintendent and you are the principal, or whatever, right? That we interact with people as a result of the titles that we have from our jobs. But a transformative relationship is a relationship that's built from and cultivated from spaces of our humanity. This is when we create spaces of empathy. Here is a list of the distinctions between transformative and transactional relationships. We see that transformative relationships are built and created and cultivated by perceived vulnerability and trust, intimacy, transparency, care, empathy. Now, how do you cultivate that? I know that when I was trained as a sociologist at UC Berkeley and in education, that we know from the research that relationships matter, but nowhere in my training did I learn how to cultivate transformative relationships, right? These are spaces, you don't need the training to be human, you need this permission to be human in your organization and space. Here's an example of an organization that began to address violence using these profound transformative relationships. This is a map of Richmond, California, small area of Richmond, California, North Richmond, was experiencing more and more gun violence. And in response to gun violence, the city of Richmond were hiring more and more police officers, but the hiring of more and more police officers did not translate to the reduction in crime. And so Devone Bogan, a brilliant, innovative community worker, went to the city of Richmond and said, I think I have a solution. Give me the resources and money, and I want to hire formerly incarcerated men and women and train them how to cultivate transformative relationships with young people who carry guns. And that relationship can translate to a reduction in gun violence. And so they eventually gave Devone some resources, and he created the Office of Neighborhood Safety, which is still in place. There's a city office. It's a city office in the city of Richmond now called the Office of Neighborhood Safety. I'm not going to read these values and beliefs, but if you could look at the last one, the fifth one, the relationship is the intervention, and the intervention is the relationship. What Devone was able to do is not just have these values sit on paper, but he was able to train formerly incarcerated men and women to cultivate transformative, loving, empathy-driven relationships with other young men in the neighborhood who carried guns. Now, when I heard about it, I didn't believe it. So when I went and did some observation, this is a picture of Sam having an intervention. And their interventions, they train them to have these conversations. And one of the things that what occurred in these relationships is it didn't look like much. They would be talking, but they were trained to say three things. One, I want you to be alive and free. Two, is there anything I can do for you? And three, I love you, man. Now, I know that sounds really corny. I love you, man, right? But they actually said that. But over time, the young men who carried guns began to see the formerly incarcerated employees of the Office of Neighborhood Safety, not as city employees, but they began to see them as their uncles, their cousins, because they would say things like, hey, Jim, I know your brother needs some cleats. I got some in my car. Or your mama said she was going to go to Costco to get some food. I went ahead and got her some stuff. Go ahead and take this home. In other words, they became these sort of surrogate uncles, and that cultivated a sense of connection and transformative connection that the city of Richmond and these formerly incarcerated men were able to have with these young men who carried guns. Now, one of the things that they said is that they didn't tell them not to carry guns, but they said, if you need to use one, come see me first. This is Joe, right? And Joe said, we don't tell you not to carry guns, but if you need to use one, come see me first. So there was a shooting, unfortunately, that happened in North Richmond. And the young men that Joe was working with in the Office of Neighborhood Safety, they got shot at and they were going to go retaliate. They got their guns together. They was like, yeah, man, we getting ready to go light them up. But you know what? Joe said, call him first. So on the way to go shoot up a party, they called Joe. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is what happened. They called Joe. Joe said, oh, I know y'all got to shoot. You're going to go do your shooting, but check it out. Come see me first. So they came and saw Joe, and they were all hyped, or they're all hyped up. And Joe said, let's go get some pizza. Now, that sounds funny, but if you're 13, 14, 15 years old, that's carrying a gun, right? That intervention, that relationship, let's go get some pizza, they're children. He was able to de-escalate that instance. And if you do that day in and day out, over and over and over again, with a group of about 60 young men, and you have an office that saturates them with transformative relationships. And there are other things that they do, like take them on trips to Washington, D.C., take them on trips to South Africa. These 60 young men that they were working with, the results that you get is a dramatic reduction in crime. Unfortunately, I don't have the slide that shows you that when the program began, they had 45 homicides, and 4 years later, they were down to 12. And to this day, they're able to keep the shooting rate under 10 per year because they were able to do this kind of intervention with transformative relationships. The third pivot is a pivot from problem to possibility. And this means that we oftentimes have to force ourselves in our staff meetings and our leadership work to not only focus on problem solving, because problem solving is important, But research suggests that possibility creation, when we focus on the possibility, that it creates a sense of well-being because we have greater control and greater predictivity over what is possible than over the challenges that we face, sometimes the problems that we try to solve. Now, I'm not suggesting that we abandon problem solving, but what I am suggesting is that problem solving becomes a way that we continue. It becomes like we're always on a sort of treadmill of problem solving, this problem over that problem, and we never free ourselves to actually think about a possibility. But well-being comes from not just addressing problems. Well-being comes from our ability to see beyond the present condition. I'll say it again. Our well-being comes from our ability to see beyond the present condition. How many of you know what this is? I don't know if everybody has access to chat, but if you do have access to chat, in the chat window right now, if you know what this is, what was your favorite arcade game? Now, for those of you who are younger, you may not know what this is. This is an arcade. In an arcade, when I was, we have to go and put quarters in, and we had to, oh, I see it. Oh, it's going fast. Pac-Man, I see a lot of Pac-Man. Tetris, Pinball, Miss Pac-Man, Centipede, go ahead, Centipede. Galaxia, that was my favorite, right? Mortal Kombat, Centipede, right? See, okay, Marvel, oh, that was a new one, y'all. Street Fighter, that's a new one. I can see the age of folks in here, right? So there was a game in these arcades called Whack-A-Mole. Y'all remember that? Whack-A-Mole. So Whack-A-Mole was a game where you get the quarter and the mole would pop up like this and would just keep going, and you would try to hit it, and you would get points by I see that. Okay. You get points by hitting the whack-a-mole, the mole, right? Well, so whack-a-mole is kind of like problem solving. That's kind of like the mode that we get in, that we continuously are in playing a game of whack-a-mole. So much so that whack-a-mole shapes how we talk about the challenges that we face, right? Oftentimes, the whack-a-mole, the kind of problem-solving mentality, enshrines the language that we use. Oftentimes, we use confined words to talk about the work that we're involved in, and we don't lean into the open words. And so the pivot from problem to possibility means that we have to practice thinking about, imagining beyond the conditions that we're facing in our schools and our school communities. There are small activities we can have, even in our classrooms, that cultivate the ability for young people, for our students, to see beyond. For example, I don't have a bunch of time, so I'll give you we could talk about this in Q&A if there's examples, but I have examples of that stuff that you could do tomorrow in your staff meeting with your team or with young people that allows that pivot from problem focus to possibility creating. So I'm gonna skip past this one. And the last pivot is a pivot from hustle to flow. So what is this? So this pivot from hustle to flow means that all of us know what it feels like to be in this constant mode of frenzy, right? This constant mode of frenzy. And this mode of frenzy comes from capitalist culture that wants to value a human being by what a human being can produce or earn. And we can't make deep healing change in a hurry. We can't create empathy in a hurry. We can't create the conditions for healing in a hurry. We can't just come up with a 6-week plan for well-being, y'all. In other words, we have to make a pivot to flow and understand that oftentimes the issues that the well-being that we want to create will take time, right? And so what this last pivot means is that we have to be aware of our addiction to frenzy, the culture of frenzy in our work. We all know what it feels like when we say, damn, I wish I wouldn't have agreed to be on that committee, or I have so much to do, or I've just joined another committee and I already am full. We know what it feels like to be in this sort of constant addiction to frenzy. What flow suggests is that we give ourselves permission and space to slow down and create more realistic timelines for ourselves, for our work and our projects. It means that we find micro spaces of well-being. It might mean just 5 minutes of flow, right? And the board that I was a chair of at the California Endowment, when we started our board meetings had been very technical, but when I was a chair, what we did is we stopped and we said, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to have social emotional check-ins where every single board member just talked about what was going on in their life. And it felt weird because we need to get to the agenda. We need to get to the real agenda. But it created a condition that allowed us to know each other better and to actually create and make decisions that were more meaningful, that we didn't feel that we were rushed through. So I'm going to skip past these just for time. This is a picture of Michelle Alexander, who I think is one of the greatest brilliant and legal minds of our time, said in a New York Times op-ed that she is not going to practice law or write about law anymore. She is actually going to Union Theological School. And the reason is that the challenges that we face, she said, in our society are not just legal or political or policy problems, but at its core, the problems that we face are ethical, moral, spiritual questions. And it raises the questions about who we are and who we're willing to become and what we're willing to do now. And so I hope that these 4 pivots gives you some insight. If you want to learn more about these healing-centered strategies, you can put your phone up to that QR code and it'll give you some ways, a process to learn about how to use these healing-centered strategies. And then lastly, we'll share this PowerPoint with you, but if you want to download a toolkit that talks about how you can take these pivots and these healing-centered strategies, you can actually use those in your discussions. I'm going to stop there because my time is up. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to share these ideas with you. So I'll stop there for Q&A.
Can I just share? Thank you. Thank you so much. I really wanted to just share my gratitude. I was at home. I was thinking about do I have bubbles at home? Because I want to do that. And also thinking about that micro spaces of well-being, so much good stuff, right? So I have notes here and I almost forgot that I was co-host. So please forgive me.
Dr. Dickerson, I cannot hear you. So I don't know if that's on my side or your side, but I could tell you were into it, whatever you were saying, but I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's on our side or
Dr. Berg, can you hear me?
So everybody,
yeah, we can hear you.
So maybe it's on our side.
So Dr. Jenwright, I'll can somebody tell him I'll let him know how I feel. But if you all can hear me, I wanted to share my gratitude because I was taking notes and I honestly kind of sort of forgot that I was supposed to be co-hosting this thing. So Dr. Berg, are we going to do some questions?
We're trying to work out why I can't hear you.
Okay, perfect. So
maybe,
as we work that out,
if there's a question in chat, I think.
Yeah, well, let's see if we can move to Q&A.
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay, great. All right, so we're gonna we have a couple questions, and so Dr. Bird, do you have any questions you want to start off with, and then I can hop in here as well. I see the queue.
I do think somebody was asking just for a real quick recap about the second pivot.
The second pivot. The name? Are you looking for the name of this?
Yeah, so the second pivot is a pivot from transactional relationships to transformative relationships. The first pivot is a pivot from lens to mirror work. So I'll say them. Pivot from lens to mirror, a pivot from transactional relationships to transformative relationships. The third pivot is a pivot from problem focus and problem solving to possibility creating. And the last pivot is a pivot from hustle to flow.
Perfect, thank you. And I believe we're going to share the PowerPoint, so you do have that. You'll have that information for you as well. So I have a good question here, Dr. Jenray. It says, how can we hold leadership accountable to do work, mirror work, because sometimes they are the source of creating a PTSD in the workplace, and staff feel powerless to speak up due to fear of retaliation? That was a lot, but a really good question.
Yeah, so great question. First is, what are you doing for yourself? There's a tendency, the first question, I think sometimes we ask ourselves the wrong first question, and that is, and I do it myself because I'm an educator and I work with young people and students, is what do I need to do for the students and how do I change the system, right? Great questions, but the first question is, what are you doing? What kind of mirror work are you doing for yourself? How are you what are you doing so that you're doing the reflection? Not only about your harm, but what are you imagining your own life to look like? What does an ideal work situation look like for you? What kinds of social emotional supports do you have in your personal life, not just in your professional life? I hope this is making sense, right? So, like, a lot of us went through COVID and lost people. I lost my father to COVID. There was, how are we actually grappling with that personally and professionally? What kinds of spaces do we have in our settings to talk about that? So my question to you, or my response to you, is first, how are you using the pivots for yourself? Second, you may not be able to change the administration or the leadership, but you can find 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other people in your own organization and space or school to create your own pivot group, your own healing group. And you can meet regularly to use these practices that we have on that in that handbook, to begin to use those practices in your own professional and personal work. And we have a certification process where you can really go deep in these practices so that you can use them in your own community organization or your own classroom. So those are 3 ways I've answered that question, but I hope that we've given you some support to begin to think about ways to use that. Great question.
Thank you. I have another question for you. Where do you see artists in the arts playing a transformative role for organizations and youth, particularly system-involved youth?
Well, I mean, I think arts education is uniquely and already positioned for healing types of work. I think many arts education practitioners and organizations are already doing healing-centered work and already using these pivots because art is perfectly aligned for the deeper reflection, so that when you're producing art, it is an expression of something that's in here already that gives you a permission to get it out. So if it's spoken word, if it's visual art. And so I think that the arts education, LA Arts, LA County Arts is already engaged in some of this work and is uniquely positioned to really use the practice to create those spaces of well-being. And I know that's already happening in LA. We're working together collaboratively to really use some healing-centered strategies to really expand that in LA County. And so I know that arts educators are already uniquely positioned, already doing the work. It's just aligning what we're calling healing-centered and what we're calling for pivots to advance it in community and school settings.
Perfect.
That was a lot of words, wasn't it, Dr. Dickinson? I could say, y'all already doing it. Next question.
So we are recording this. So for those of you who are wanting to kind of go back, because I know for me, I'm going to want to go back and rewatch to take more notes. So we are recording that. So that's great. I think I have one more question. I think I have time for another question, right? Yes. Okay. So this one says, can you give us some practical ideas on how to exercise these pivots in workspaces?
Oh, great. All right. Let's start with your staff meeting. Let's start with that. I'm not going to start with what you do in your classroom. Start with your next staff meeting. Your staff meeting is probably an hour. It might be 2 hours, right? And your agenda probably has no space for a pivot on there. None of them. right? Because your agenda is, I got to get this stuff done. And in the focusing on getting those things done, you're actually not creating healing centered or spaces for well-being. So in your next agenda, take 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes, depending on how large your meeting is. It's going to feel really weird because you know you got our agenda's already packed. Take 10 minutes for people to do some type of a pivot. Mirror work, right? So you might want to start with mirror work. Mirror work questions such as, what is your greatest aspiration for this month? Just like you already did some of that. What do you imagine if you were 100% successful in your job right now, or in 4 years, what would that look like? That's a possibility question. You are already practicing a pivot if you put that 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever in your agenda from a pivot from hustle to flow. You've already done it because you're trying to create spaces of flow. It's going to feel weird because we're so used to jumping into. So that's in a staff meeting. And there's a lot of examples in your classroom, right? Arts educators are already doing it, right? But for healing, if you're specifically on healing, questions about how young people have been harmed, like how have you been harmed, how are you feeling, and how do you want to feel? One quick activity that you might want to put in your staff meeting or in a classroom is an assignment that asks young people to go out and draw or come up with some form of expression about the things that they like about themselves, the things that they like. It's a really hard activity, and they have to only use positive words, not like, I wish I wasn't. That's negative. But I like that I'm active. I'm like that I'm vocal. I love that, whatever they like about themselves. What would that look like if adults did that as well in your next staff meeting? What are 3 assets that you have that you really like? These are practices that begin to cultivate well-being. It doesn't happen overnight, but over time, you begin to see shifts and how people relate and connect with one another.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of you who are asking questions. And thank you, Dr. Joy, again, for helping us to answer. I feel like we need a part 2. I don't know if that's something we can figure out, but I feel like the questions are great. And it's like, now we have that knowledge. It's kind of like, how do we go implement it? And I see that from the questions that are coming in. So thank you again for that. I believe that's all the questions. That's all the time we have for the questions. So Dr. Bird, I believe we're back to you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm not even going to lie. I was taking some notes, to incorporate in upcoming staff meetings. So I think it's going to be helpful for me and my team. And I really appreciate you being here and inspiring us. We now have time for a break. So, giving people some time to reflect on the inspirational session we just had. Why don't we take a break and meet back here at 10:40?
Okay. We're back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the 5th Annual School and Community Symposium. Now, I would like to, again, thank Dr. Jen Wright and his team for providing such an insightful opening to today's discussion on collective healing. So as we move through to our second part of the symposium, we'll be focusing on the two of the community schools pillars and exploring how they can promote healing processes in schools through collective efforts. So the UCLA Center for Community Schooling, in partnership with the Alameda County Office of Education, is the lead for the State Transformation Assistance Center, also known as the STAC, STAC. The STAC is tasked with assisting school districts in their efforts to collaborate with the California Department of Education in the implementation of their new initiative called the California Community Schools Partnership Program. I am delighted to introduce Dr. Karen Hunter Courts today for her to speak. So Dr. Courts directs the UCLA Center for Community Schooling and is a faculty member in the UCLA School of Education and Information Studies. Professor Courts led the design team in 2007 to create the UCLA Community School and served in 2017 on the design team for a second site, the Horace Mann UCLA Community School. Her work in this area has transformed the vision and the trajectory of community schools in California. She co-leads the California Community Schools State TA Center and serves on the Strategy Council of the Partnership for the Future of Learning. During her presentation today, she will showcase the work her and her team is doing with the state, touch upon the CSI pillars, and demonstrate the significance of the collaborative leadership pillar with the help of Montebello High School and their CSI participants. Dr. Courts, please take it away.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Dr. Dickerson. It's a real honor to be here today. I want to start by sharing this beautiful mural on the next slide, please. And as Dr. Jen Wright just reminded us, right, building empathy is critical to healing-centered engagement, and it's also foundational to thriving community schools. This is a 55-foot mural by UCLA art professor Judy Baca. It anchors the library at the Robert F. Kennedy Community Schools, and it's called Seeing Through Others' Eyes. Each petal of this flower represents a particular struggle for social justice, seen through different eyes: a soldier, a child, and an elder. The center of the flower reminds us of the day when Kennedy decided to run for president and flew to Delano, California, to support the end of Cesar Chavez's 25-day fast. Together, they were working to improve education, wages, housing, and working conditions for thousands of migrant farm workers. On the next slide, you can see that school, 3 months after winning the California primary, Kennedy was tragically assassinated at the hotel, the Ambassador Hotel. Now that site is the site of our school, the UCLA Community School, and 5 other teacher-led schools. And together, we are the Robert F. Kennedy Community Schools. Our 6 schools serve 4,000 TK through 12 students in the central city neighborhoods of Pico, Union, and Koreatown. Most of our families are immigrants from Mexico and Central America who have come to the United States to build a better life for their children. Before the school opened in 2009, students as young as 5 sat on buses for a long time to more than 65 schools across the city. The schools in their community were critically overcrowded, operating on year-round schedules, and less than a third of the students went on to college. From the groundwork to create the UCLA Community School in 2006 to the achievement of preparing 95% of our graduates for college in 2014, the school's success lies deep inside the people who have shaped it, the histories they've lived, and the shared beliefs that propelled them forward. On the next slide is a photo of Queena Kim. Queena is the principal of the UCLA Community School. She lives a mile from the school. She's an active member of her local church and civic organization. Principal Kim embraces her role to elevate the strengths of students, families, teachers, staff, and partners. In Queena's own words, community schools are not only academic institutions, they're a microcosm of our society. I truly believe, she says, that if we can build schools for everyone to thrive in, we can transform all. It's common at our school to hear Queena and others say, we lead from every chair. That's how she and others developed the school's multilingual program. They listened to families who wanted their children to keep their home language as they learned English. Teachers experimented and developed a program that not only lifted up the linguistics assets of families, but also recognized the deep role that culture plays in learning and development. So when I'm asked to define and explain, which is a tricky task, what is a community school? I start with examples like these. I want people to feel the power of communities as the heartbeat of public education. The power is rooted in the hopes and dreams, those open words that Dr. Jinray just spoke of, that families have for their children, the passion that educators have for preparing the next generation, and the promise and agency of the young people we serve. Community schools embrace the power by being democratic at every turn. And that's the idea I want to focus on today, democratic at every turn. And as John Dewey shared in 1902, the conception of the school as a social center is born of our entire democratic movement. So it's a real honor to join you today to probe this idea further. So what does it mean for a community school to be democratic at every turn? Why is collaborative leadership so important? And I have to share right at the outset, for me, it is absolutely the most important pillar because it sets the tone for how people in schools interact and view one another with empathy, compassion, collective agency, and the recognition that we're all in this together. So on the next slide, I wanted to share something that's just been released by a task force that's 4 organizations called the Community Schools Forward Task Force. They just released this framework. It includes the 4 pillars that most of us are very familiar with, but it adds 2 new practices: rigorous community-connected classroom instruction and a culture of belonging, safety, and care. And that was, that idea was lifted up so beautifully by Dr. Jinray. So informed by a century of scholarship, these 6 practices are supported, and you can see this in the puzzle, by a set of enabling conditions, such as trusting relationships and actionable data. And fundamental to this strategy, the framework recognizes that community schools can't grow without a supportive infrastructure from district, county, community-based organizations, and even university partners. So, as you can see in this definition of collaborative leadership and shared power and voice, it's going to take bringing everybody together, families, students, teachers, principals, community partners, and others, to co-create a culture of professional learning, trust, and shared responsibility. So on the next slide, I really want to, today, my strategy, this is what I'm trying out, to lift up the idea of shared power and voice, linked back to the lotus flower metaphor in the mural. I want to look through others' eyes today and feature their voices in a series of short video clips. I also want to give a very special shout out right now to Alan Ward from the LACOE tech team, because he has been really helpful in putting these all together, and it wouldn't have happened without him. So you heard a little bit about the principal's perspective when I introduced Queena. I'd also like to look through the eyes of a researcher, a teacher, a parent, a state center, so my role in the state center, and a student. My hope is that these different perspectives will help us see collaborative leadership, not just as a technique, getting away from that technical perspective for decision-making or integrating services. My hope is to leave you inspired by the idea that schools belong to all of us. And as such, they must be democratic, inclusive spaces where everyone feels that their expertise and commitment to the community is recognized. So I'm going to start with my researcher hat on the next slide. That's the one I know the most. And I want to just lift up a little bit of the research on the importance of collaborative leadership, right? This is well documented. Tons and tons of articles and books and studies have been written about this, that when we have schools where there is this deep sense of shared responsibility and trust, we see increased commitment among all stakeholders. People are feeling much more emboldened to be innovative. There's a greater capacity for organizational change and improvement. And even links to positive student outcomes when it's associated with teacher collaborative learning. So there's lots of good reasons to trust that this is not just an idea that makes sense, but it's a very effective and important idea for transforming our schools. So on the next slide, I want to add to these empirical findings and lift up a philosophical idea. You know, as the political theorist Ian Shapiro argues, the concepts of democracy and justice are really intimately linked. These go together. So when we combine them, democratic justice suggests that we really should have a mistrust of prevailing hierarchies. Democratic justice invites us to look for institutional and other structuring devices to limit them and to mitigate their unnecessary and corrosive events or effects. So again, how do we think about hierarchy here? So I'm from one of the most dominant prevailing hierarchies there are, higher education. And in higher education, there is very strong traditions of how we produce knowledge and what counts as knowledge and what research findings are. So I'd like to first share a short video of my colleague, Dr. Beth Trinchero, and hear how she talks about how schools can challenge this hierarchy when it comes to research.
My name is Beth Trinchero. I'm a founding teacher from the UCLA Community School. I'm also an English teacher. I've been a member of the Research and Accountability Committee since the school opened. The Research and Accountability Committee is a special partnership between the school, LAUSD, and UCLA. One of the most important things that we do is review, approve, and monitor research studies that happen at the school. Over the past 10 years, I've noticed that the most impactful research studies have been the Research Practice Partnerships, or RPPs, which are studies where a researcher collaborates with a teacher and or a practitioner, and they come together to solve a real world problem that the school cares about. These partnerships put students first at the forefront. In one particular study, Aung Sang, a researcher from UCLA, actually partnered with students in a youth-led participatory action research project to explore how technology helps to elevate student voice. Together, they created prototypes of student portfolios, which are currently being implemented throughout the school. Sid, a researcher, and Aurora, our college counselor, who are collaborating together to continue to strengthen college-going supports for our high school students and even our alumni. In one study, Janet, a researcher, partnered with Nancy, a second and third grade dual language teacher, to help students become lifelong readers in both Spanish and English. This year, Carla, a researcher, partnered with Claire, a high school history teacher, to explore this question. What would it take to transition an English-only classroom to a multilingual classroom? These research practice partnerships are helping our school to realize its original vision to offer a K-12 dual language program. I think it's owning one's school-wide data, and rather than being afraid of that data, instead being curious and seeking to problem solve around things that are important to the school. This is possible. I have seen it, and I am seeing it at the UCLA Community School.
So as Beth shared, research practice partnerships focus on issues and questions that the community values. And that's fundamental, right? That's disrupting hierarchies. It's not a researcher's agenda. It's what the school cares about. It also challenges who has knowledge and how it's produced. So working with young people to see it through their eyes, do research projects on topics they care about. Owning your own data. Data is not something done to a school. It allows you to be curious and ask questions. And always asking why and engaging the community in collective sense making. And these lessons aren't just for schools that are partnered with UCLA and other universities. The point I want to make here is that it reminds us that together we can generate insights and knowledge to inform the work of community schools. So in that way, that's democratic at every turn, democratic knowledge production. So I want to turn next to look through the eyes of a community school teacher. This is an article I co-authored that lifts up the role of teachers in the community schools movement. You may recognize the teacher on the right. This is Jason Torres Rangel, because he was LACOE's Teacher of the Year, as well as the California Teacher of the Year. Jason's also a founding teacher at the UCLA Community School, where he taught for many years and wore many hats. He was a lead teacher, UCLA rep, UCLA Writing Project Fellow, Senior Advisor, and he even taught Folklorico in a seminar. In this short clip, Jason talks about why it's important to center the voices of local communities.
And so it's a really interesting place to study what's happening in the country and to study how a school community can sort of organize and push back against a larger system that says, we want to control your data, we want to control your curriculum. And we're a school and community that says, no, we know what's best for us, we know what's best for our students, and we are the experts. I think pilot schools can be a place where public schools, where the teachers are unionized and where the students do not have to pay or take a test to get in, can be places where we can transform the idea of what public education is.
So Jason just lifted up the idea that the communities are the expert, again, challenging who has knowledge and whose knowledge counts. He also referenced the fact that the school is a pilot school with local autonomy to develop its vision and practice. There are currently 40 pilot schools in LA Unified, and many of these are also thriving community schools. I've linked to a brief on this slide that you'll get later to a brief called Collaborative Leadership as the Cornerstone of Community Schools. And so these are just a few of the practices that schools with local autonomy use to share power and ensure democratic justice. It starts always with a shared set of core beliefs and a vision, the flat ecosystem of governance teams. So it's not just one, set of people making decisions, but there's an operations team and a research team and a governance team and the student-led groups, etc. There are formal roles that recognize teachers as leaders, and at the UCLA Community School, we rotate those roles. There's inclusive hiring teams who gets to join the community. There's an elect to work agreement that teachers develop every year to set the conditions for their own work. And importantly, there's a whole teacher focus. So this is really just like we have whole child focus, there's a whole teacher focus when we really consider how to create these shared structures for collaborative leadership. So on the next slide, I want to look now through the eyes of a parent. I want to start by acknowledging that there's a lot of research that documents how schools traditionally ask parents in low-income communities to comply, not engage. Make sure your child gets to school on time and does their homework. So challenging this deficit conception requires disrupting racialized institutional scripts and honoring parents' assets, interests, and agency. So to bring this idea to life, the next video clip features an after-school arts program designed to embrace families' cultural assets. You'll hear from a parent named Rebecca about her experience in the program.
Hi, I'm Bella. I'm the teaching artist for MASA this year. The students here are with their parents, so there's a huge sense of community here. Everyone here is so welcoming.
Hello, my name is Rebecca. I'm a parent and I'm also volunteering. Well, this program means a lot to me and to my family and to the community. I think it's great because I see more parents getting involved, spending time with their kids. This year, I'm looking forward to learn new stuff, spend more time with my friends, and get to know new people. I've seen how the program is growing a lot. We have a lot of people. We're always looking forward to come to MASA.
So we did a case study of the MASA program at UCLA and lifted it up as an example of transformative parent engagement. As this quote captures, the collective art making was empowering for parents, right? For us in Masa, it's an opportunity to come together as a community, as family, as friends. And that's taught me that I have more potential than what I thought. Never in my life did I think that I could make art. And when I see things that I make, I say, wow, I can do it. The arts is so important and so generative. And this case study really focused on creative confidence and art production. The program invites parents to teach their own cultural practices as well, such as weaving and knitting and pottery, lifting up the many funds of knowledge that animate community schools. For example, after the 2016 federal election, members of the Masa community came together in solidarity to create a quilt to represent the idea of sanctuary. In the image here, the quilt's hanging behind the team from the UCLA Law School that runs our on-campus immigrant family legal clinic, which is another example of partners coming together to share responsibility for community well-being. So I'm going to turn from this, what I consider very exciting and inspiring example. I'm going to put on a new pair of glasses and another hat and shift gears now, because I want to move us from the school level to the state level. So I think most of you know, obviously, that California has made this historic investment in community schools, and I'm really honored to work alongside the team that is providing assistance. In the next slide, share some of the basic contours. I'm sure many of you are very well acquainted with, being grantees yourself. In addition to the enormous $4.1 billion investment, I'm really excited by the fact that this was extended to 2031. That signifies that community schooling is not just a reform du jour, but it's a long-term strategy for ensuring excellent public education across our state. As the next slide shows, the first cohort of grantees are located across California in rural and urban communities, serving students most in need. And so the next slide has that map, and you'll be getting this later. You can drill down there. You can see all the grantees if you don't know the full set already. In the next slide, there's a breakdown of the common budget items, how grantees are spending their funding. This was prepared by the Opportunity Institute, which is a really terrific series that is tracking the rollout of the state program in terms of funding. So to support this, in the next slide, there's a statewide system of support, right? There's funding in the legislation for a lead TA center, 8 regional TA centers, including LACOE, and grants to county offices of education. The next slide is our state team, or we call ourselves the STAC. As you can see, we are a diverse group representing 4 very different organizations with our own hierarchies and power dynamics. On May 18th, when the State Board of Education announced that we were selected as the lead TA center, we all felt the weight of this charge. Much like developing the work of a community school, we felt, this was a daunting task to bring together different partners and programs in ways that lifted up the state's assets and responded to its needs. So every week we start our weekly Zoom meeting with a Jamboard activity to make space for collective visioning. Early on, we decided to change the technical to transformational and really push ourselves to imagine ways to help people think differently about change, away from the implementation of discrete programs and towards the reimagining, thinking that those open frames that Dr. Ginwright mentioned to us, to reimagine schools as communities capable of dreaming big, right? So the next slide represents our current thinking about how best to structure transformational assistance. We're developing resources that articulate a transformational vision for systems change. Each month we convene a community of transformative practice that will become a space to learn from and coordinate work across the 8 regional TA centers. We're also engaging in deep dives to support and document systems change. And we have a robust public engagement strategy that centers the value of stories shared from a variety of perspectives. The next slide represents the framework guiding this work. So we affectionately call this the 4x4. 4 pillars, 4 conditions of learning, 4 practices, 4 commitments. And on the next slide, you can see that what we're really trying to do is challenge the industry of school reform. The industry is, its engine, it runs with competitive grants, short-term funding cycles, a focus on compliance and reporting. Instead, we're trying to lift up the very core of community schooling as collaborative, democratic, cross-sector partnerships that can lead to social transformation. So this is a narrative shift we're trying to make. And as the next slide shows, we know that the California Community Schools Partnership Program is being framed as a strategy for coherence to bring many allied reform investments together. And you can see the list here, it's massive. Really, it's extraordinary what California is taking on. And in its, the very essence and its focus on collaborative cross-sector work, community schooling is trying to bring many exciting efforts together. So as the next slide shows, we also know that transforming schools, this is daunting, requires attending to multiple dimensions and levels of change. In this way, schools are multidimensional and multi-level problem-solving ecologies working to create, sustain, and improve a myriad of interrelated structures and educational practices. So I'm sharing this very, I teach a class at UCLA on school reform, and I share this kind of ecological model because it's really important in my mind to not think about reform as this program that gets implemented in this fixed amount of time in one part of a system. Instead, we're all part of this very complicated landscape that we have to not just be overwhelmed by, but realize our place in and how we're trying to move a lot of different things and really being patient with ourselves in this work and bringing grace to the work that this is big. This is not just the work of 3 years. This is, for many of us, the work of a lifetime and generations, the work of social transformation. So on the next slide, our try to articulate our challenge here. It's to both work within and work to change, right? We're all stuck in this system. And we know it's complex and multidimensional, but we also know that we have to really, for lasting change to happen, we have to challenge the system we're in. So to approach complexity, scale, and depth, I look to a lot of the leading research here on social change that says we should be paying attention to kind of 3 big ideas here. And this is very community schools. We have to foster connections. We have to develop new relationships that promote continuous learning. So that's, the community schools initiative, working with the TK team, working with the school behavioral health group. I mean, all of this has to come together. We have to embrace context. This is not something that happens in a vacuum, like at a state level without context. These are particular people like Queena and Jason and Rebecca that live and breathe in places. And we have to know that. And we have to know what those places and spaces mean to people. And importantly, and I've made this point already, we have to challenge power. We have to reconfigure it. The ability to make decisions, set agendas, create ideology that influence others' capacity to determine their own actions. So we have to take this on seriously again, which is why this pillar is so important. So on the next slide, I've got an example here of our deep dive strategy. So we are trying we're going to identify 3 deep dive sites as they seek to impact these 4 areas of community schools work, transform schools, etc. We're going to have to develop new relationships to do that. So we're looking at a vertical slice of the system this is based on implementation research, from the classroom to the Capitol, focused on transforming the system in particular context. Again, think of that ecology metaphor. We're also working to reconfigure power by engaging community school fellows in these sites to lift up the work of transformation. And as the next slide shows, we know that the sustainability of community schools is going to require that the entire public engage with us in this movement and hold it accountable for a transformational vision. On the next slide, you can see a few of the resources that we've produced to date. And I invite you all to join us every Tuesday afternoon. There's a collective learning space. You'll get these slides. They're also on the STAC website. Join us, please. And stay tuned for some of the things we're making. This is an image of a flipboard of the state framework that has just come out. So we're excited, and we're excited to engage with all. all of you, and in particular, work with the amazing LACOE team in their RTAC and all of their partners. So to close now my presentation, there's a really important set of eyes that I haven't looked through, which is the eyes of a student. So I'd like to listen now to a middle school student named Jenny as she describes what collaborative leadership looks like to her.
The first time I wanted to become a computer engineer was in 7th grade when I was introduced to Scratch, a program that MIT created. So when I first started the program, I was like, this is so easy. I want to like continue doing this, but like more advanced. So in 8th grade, I started doing robotics. LACOE is a lockbot, and when LACOE was first born or created, it took around 2 hours. So until the end of the enrollment fair, it was completed. And when you put up the combination 213, our error code, it opens automatically, so you can put stuff inside and then lock it. And then it'll open automatically, and you could take stuff in, or you can put stuff inside of it. And then you close it, and then you lock it again. You see, like, community school is kind of like a big family, so I mostly feel happy and joyful here, because if I would have been in another school, I wouldn't gotten the same opportunities here. We're not only just like a school where everyone leaves at 3:30. Some of us stay for tutoring. They sometimes stay after school just to talk and hang out with us, so they help me get ready for college. They talk to me, they're personal. Whatever you want it to happen, we can make it happen. We're a community. If you want to have a book club, we can make that book club happen. If you want a robotics club, we will make it happen. If you want a gardening club, we can make it happen, so anything can happen here. Hi, my name is Jenny Martinez, and I want to become a computer engineer.
I think I've watched that video 1,000 times and it always chokes me up. I just love Jenny's phrase, you can make anything happen here, we're a community. So that vision centers the passion and agency of students. It also lifts up, you know, she's got her robot there, right? And she was supported to take computer science. The learning that was provided is disrupting the digital divide in our district, right? The school offers courses like Introduction to Data Science and Exploring Computer Science. And that really lifts up the teaching that helped Jenny feel that she could do anything. Jenny's learning, as she shared, extends well beyond the school day, right? She participated in the summer program at MIT. She came on weekends to do hackathons. She started a Girls in Motion coding club on campus. Jenny's learning was supported and enriched by a whole bunch of partnerships. She got an award from the National Center for Women in Information Technology to pursue her passion. She worked with local researchers and engineers to help imagine her career as an engineer to a community organization called 9 Dots. She demonstrated all of these interests and passions when applying to college. Last year, Jenny Martinez graduated from Columbia University with a degree in computer science engineering. I just get choked up. I mean, her story is beautiful. I had the chance to talk with her last spring, and she's a remarkable young woman. And she talks all about the community that supports her and that continues to support her. But our vision for teaching and learning is rooted in this idea that we are stronger together. So I remember a year after she went off to Columbia, Jenny learned that another peer from our school was going to begin her freshman year at an East Coast college. But because of this parent's immigration status, the student was going to have to make the move alone. Jenny volunteered to fly out, moved her into her freshman dorm so she wouldn't have to make the move alone. Again, you take people with you. Our vision of teaching and learning enables us to tell many stories like Jenny's. Stories that are driven by the belief that you can make anything happen. So in my final slide, I want to share another piece of art. This is a powerful mural at our school. Overlaying a 3-story image of one of our students are the words, I see you, I am you, we are one. This is the heart of collaborative leadership, and I hope the voices I've shared today have helped bring to life how community schools can create strong, empathetic relationships that challenge hierarchies and that embrace our collective agency. So it's my great pleasure now to pass the baton to Dr. Selena Barras, who is helping to lead LACOE's community school initiative, and she'll be facilitating a conversation about collaborative leadership with the Montebello team.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quartz. You are always inspiring, and I learn so much every time I hear you, and we are honored to have you leading the STAC, co-leading the STAC, and supporting us through this transformation as a state and as a nation. So thank you so much. So as Dr. Quartz introduced me, I am Dr. Selena Barajas Ledesma. I'm one of the coordinators with the LACOE Community Schools Initiative and have been honored for the past 3 years to work within the DMH LACOE partnership to transform 15 high schools in our 15 districts across LA County to become community schools. And now I'm honored to be part of the team for the Los Angeles County Regional Technical Assistance Center for the California Community Schools Partnership Program. Today, we're going to have a conversation with some amazing individuals from Montebello High School. And if we could bring them up on the screen and take down this slide so we could see their wonderful faces. We just need Ginger to join us. And I'm just going to start and jump in. I'd like to have them introduce themselves and start with sharing a little bit about how long they've been supporting the community of Montebello.
Hi, Constantino Duarte, principal of Montebello High School. Been at Montebello High School now for 3 years. As an educator, 30 something. So I'm up there, but again, Montebello High School, just so you know, is about 10 miles east of downtown LA, and pass it on to our amazing team. Next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Indira Argumosa, and I'm a school counselor here at Montebello High School. I actually grew up here in Montebello, and I attended elementary, intermediate school, and Montebello High School. I'm a graduate from this school. After graduating from UCSB, I came back to Montebello, and I was a volleyball coach here for 3 years, and I also taught math for 9 years. This is now my 9th year as a school counselor, and this is my way of giving back to my community.
Hello, my name is Ginger Alvarez. I'm the Los Angeles County Office of Education Community School Specialist assigned at Montebello High School. And we have been in this program for about 2 years. This is officially our 2nd year.
Thank you so much. We are excited to build on the amazing work that Dr. Quartz shared with us to learn more of what this looks like at a school site level from 3 different perspectives. So I'm going to start with my first question for Mr. Duarte. Collaborative leadership is not something new, or we also may know it as shared leadership. It's not something new in education. We've seen it sometimes as a requirement in policies for decades that you need to get stakeholder voice and get their input. But within the community schools framework and the California Community Schools Partnership Program framework, it is highlighted throughout the 4 pillars, the cornerstone commitments, and a proven practice. It feels different. You've been in education for many years. As a school leader, how do you lead and foster collaborative leadership practices? How is this different in a community school?
I think it's nice to follow Dr. Quartz because she hit it on the nose. It's not a one-person show. Definitely not. I think when I think of shared leadership, I think of trust. As a principal, as hard as it is, I think of letting go, and bringing stakeholders in and really listening to the needs of the school. Because I get told this a lot as a principal. You're the principal. You can do whatever you want. And in reality, we do not. We do what our school community needs. And that entails, bringing all the needs of all of our stakeholders and so that we can help our students learn and move forward. And as mentioned earlier by Dr. Eduardo, our main goal is to remove those barriers that impede on our kids' learning. If a student is hungry, they're not going to learn. If they're worried about something going on at home or their parents got unemployed, and especially the last couple of years with the pandemic, with all the loss we've had, they're not going to learn. So that's our focus. And as Ginger remembers, when about 3 years ago, our main thing was, how do we reach out during the pandemic And so we decided was basic needs. Let's start with basic needs. So we started having food drives. And guess what? Then we started inviting our students to come in because kids are at home during virtual, and we did it in a safe manner. We brought them in with masks, and we started with 100 boxes of food. We went up to 500, and then that started going just the whole the outreach to let people know that we are the hub of Montebello, and whatever that people need, we're here. But going back to what you asked about what does shared leadership mean to me, it's what a community does, and getting all input. Our main goal is to connect and to inspire our kids. But not only that, I think we got to go back to, we needed to inspire our teachers when we came back. We needed to support our parents. It was a whole group effort to include everybody and support everybody, because not just students, although they're the main ones who've been impacted, our parents, our teachers, everybody has been impacted by this. I think, before I let somebody else go, I think the most empowering thing that this happened with us is that our students have become empowered. They're the ones who drive the agenda. As recently as a couple of weeks ago, we had wellness dogs because kids asked for it. She said, Martha, can we have some, I'm stressed out and I can't bring my dog. Can you bring him? I talked to Ginger, and Ginger made it happen. We had a health fair last year where our students again brought it up. Can we have a health fair and see what resources are out there? Again, they drive the agenda, and I think that's what I mean by letting go and having everybody have a say with our advisory council. And it's just not it's not business as usual like school site council. It's not ELAC. This is an advisory committee that's based on by community members, are some of our collaborative group members, students, you name it. They come together and we have real discussions about the needs of Montebello High School. And I think that's been the most empowering thing, is setting up those systems so that we are the hub. And I think with the shared leadership and the buy-in that we've been getting, we began to rebrand ourselves as a real place that if you look at our scores, I'll bring that up. People may say things about Montebello High School, but what they don't know is that it's a very nurturing, special place that is supported by a lot of different people. LACOE has been amazing also, but shared leadership to me is, again, trusting, letting go, and really listening to all stakeholders and making the work happen. I rarely say no. So, it's like, okay, what do we need to do to get this done?
How amazing. I'm jealous of the students at Montebello for having wellness dogs and being able to lead amazing things that are happening in Montebello. So thank you for sharing. This question is for Indira and Ginger as staff members. As a staff member, what have you seen at Montebello High School as a result of collaborative leadership? How have you felt your voice heard and uplifted? And what have the members of the Montebello High School community been able to do together? So Ginger, you've helped facilitate some of this work. Indira, you've been involved. How has that been uplifted?
Well, as a result of collaborative leadership, I have seen an increase in staff members feeling like their concerns regarding the well-being of our shared students are not only being heard, but something is being done about it. Together, as a team with teachers, counselors, and administrators, we have all come to the table to discuss these common issues. And together we've been able to develop sustainable solutions for our families. As a team, we've created systems that have streamlined our mental health follow-up process, which we identified as a gap in strengthening our mental health services. We also identified that our students and their families needed help with signing up for Medi-Cal. This led to a direct partnership with Altamed and an actual live person we can contact and ensure that our community had access to healthcare. One of our teachers shared that students needed basic things such as clothes, shoes, body wash, shampoo, and all this led to the creation of what all our students and staff members know as the Family Resource Center. Students can come here and take whatever they need. They know exactly where to go, and they've created connections, personal connections with Ginger and Susie there. We also know that our foster students, homeless students, and newcomers have needs. And as a result, as a group, we've been intentional in creating systems of supports for them. The culture of our school is a positive one, and it's trickled down to our community. Parents know they can come to Montebello High School, and if we don't have it here, we can assist them and guide them in the right direction. Me personally, I have felt empowered to speak up. As a counselor, I felt the weight of the world sometimes to solve all the problems. At the beginning of my career, I experienced a lot of secondary trauma when working with my students, but now because we're a community school, I don't feel alone. We have a team of people who work together to create solutions. And I think the most important thing is the comfort of knowing that if we have a concern, we can say it and something is going to get done about it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. You are truly inspiring and give us so much hope for creating systemic change and the impact on you personally. Ginger, you wanted to share something I could see.
How do I follow that? She said everything that we've been doing at Montebello. The great part about Montebello is we walked in with a community already. More than 34% of their population, their staff, all the way down from the cafeteria, the security person to teachers, admin. If they didn't graduate from Montebello High School, they graduate somewhere at Montebello. So there already is this shared sense of community coming in. And we've spoken to so many teachers saying, I know so-and-so's mom because I graduated with them at the school. So when we came in and we built the advisory council, there was a lot of people already wanting to join because there's such a good buy-in. So when Ms. Argumosa and Mr. Duarte talks about the shared kind of community, it wasn't such a hard sell because they were already doing the work. They've actually were the ones that would tell us, these are our needs, and Ginger and Susie, is this a partner? Can you have them join us? So they've identified the partners for us. And we've done a lot of community events because that they were able to identify. And as a group, we've done food drives, we've done focusing on our special population students, our homeless and our foster youth and our newcomers. Even up to last week, there was a traumatic event that happened within our community, the shooting at Monterey Park, which is down the street from our school. Literally the next week, Mr. Duarte and the team, we put together the New Year's Day event, and we invited people from the community to actually witness our Chinese Lunar New Year, and the kids were able to experience that. So all of these things are driven by collectively staff, students, and teachers, and families, and community members wanting to do these events. But my favorite memory so far, and this is to me, was it's like, Susie, this is it. When students started coming to us saying, we're so fortunate that people constantly help us. Can we help community organization by collecting donations? So to me, that was just like, okay, this is it. These people are amazing, because now they want to help not just the high school, but other people up until East LA, which is like the next city down the street. So
amazing. You are all truly inspiring, and we are just fortunate and humbled to be partnering with you and supporting you in really transforming the Montebello community, the families of LA County, because is a ripple, and everything that you're sharing today is now rippling onto everyone else on this webinar. And I wish we had this entire webinar to just learn from you and hear, but we will definitely create opportunities for them to reach you and contact you and just even learn more from you, because this is just a slice of everything that you're doing. So thank you again. We know that this is in between classes, in between bells, in between kids coming in. And I think we have some questions that are coming in for Dr. Quartz and yourself. So don't leave yet. And I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Bird.
Thank you so much. As Dr. Quartz was talking, and then the Montebello LACOE staff were discussing their programs, I was struck by several things that really resonated with me, and I like to carry into my work. The collective leadership, I think, just sets a tone, and getting the feedback from communities and students. I'm a strong believer that we shouldn't be doing things to people. We should be having people guide what we do for them, with them. So I really like that, and it resonated really strongly with me. I think we have some questions. I'm trying to scroll, but my cursor is jumping all over the place. I'm going to have to unplug this. Okay, let me get out of here and go here. Maybe this will help. Okay. How often, one of the questions is, how often does your advisory committee meet?
I'm not sure. Is that a question for the state center? Is that what? I guess there's, I mean, I can answer it. I know there's not.
For Montebello, I believe.
Or Montebello, great.
Once a month.
Okay.
It depends. If we were having events, then we might have to meet more. And we've also created subgroups depending on the topic or the project that we're working on.
Also, Ginger, remember to mention we have a student advisory. It's not just us. So that was created as a need also to give them more of a voice.
Fantastic. We have another question. I'm curious what determines a shortage of mental health providers. I think many would be interested in school-based positions rather than community-based, as the longevity at nonprofit organizations seems very limited generally with unlicensed practitioners who leave once they get licensed. So what is the opportunity, I guess, would be the question, and what would help fulfill the shortage of mental health providers for schools? In either Montebello or
I actually just recently we looked to hire a social worker, and that was one of the ways to kind of support that. We definitely need, we have groups that we work with already, but we really needed real-time support for our students. And with the social worker and the hire and the bringing in of interns, you know, keep that pipeline going, if you will. That would give our students real-time support here at Montebello High School. And actually, I got exposed to that really about 30 years ago when actually Dr. Eduardo was working at the elementary I was working, and we started a Healthy Start program. And she was actually one of the interns, and she provided services to our students via a social worker. That's why I asked for that recently, to kind of try to mirror that model to get that support. Because you're right, it comes and goes, but that way at least, you know, with the long-term support is there with our groups, and parents will look for, but really real time that when they need it that minute, it is something that's always a challenge.
Thank you. And another one for you, Principal Duarte. what would you say to other administrators that are unable to say yes to everything the community wants or asks for? And how do you advocate to your district for what's needed by the community and students, staff?
Well, let me rephrase that. Don't say yes to everything. And by the same token, yes, we whenever there's a way to support, it's pretty simple, because our why is we want all students to be successful, right? And so that makes it easy. And then when you work with a team with LACOE, they've been very supportive, and district has been very supportive. I think the key also has been making sure that Ginger and Susie are from our resource room, and also our well-being center, supported by the LA Department of Health. They're part of our school. This is not something separate. They have to be part of our school. They're invited to all our staff meetings. You name it, they're invited. If they don't want to come, that's okay. Coffee with the principal, you name it, they have to be part of that. But it's really just making sure that, you know, that we remember why we're here. And students come first. And so whatever we need to do, we do. Like I said, distribution, food distribution, bringing in TICO groups, we brought in the Omegas to kind of expose our students, which is a Black fraternity, to make sure that our students get exposed to other cultures. You know, it's not just about learning here. As the picture behind me, Pablo Freddy, it's also about helping our students advocate for themselves and those around them.
Thank you. Indira, as a school counselor, how do you navigate not feeling or feeling the weight of the students' and families' needs on your shoulders?
I think it just depends on the situation that the student comes to me with, and the experience that I've had, but it's just knowing that, whoa, there's a feeling here of like, this is a lot and I can only get this student so far. And I know that there's people here, we have a team of people here that I trust and I can go to that can help me help this student. So that's taken time to establish, but it's just, now that we've established that, that's just helped me not take it all on. And then there's situations where, you know, students come in here and it's a dump of so many feelings and situations and trauma. And I just learned to like, okay, I'm going to take it, but I also have a place to go myself for my own well-being. That's been established here at my school, that support for me as a person. So all of that has just helped me like face that in a healthier way.
Thank you. For Title I family engagement purposes, how are community schools intersecting with that work?
I think, you know, we're 90% free and reduced lunch here at Montebello High School. So I think that touches upon the need that we have, and it works perfectly. I mean, it's another support. I mean, it's not, again, it's not something different. It's not, you know, when you establish your single plan, right? When right now we're working on our WASP report, it's all one, you know, PLCs all working towards one goal, and it's not easy. I will tell you right now, it's not easy. But if you're transparent and you bring in the community and really give them a voice, it empowers everybody, and we move in the same direction. Not maybe at the same speed, but we're moving in the same direction.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. I think it goes back to being the hub of the community, where community is able to reach out and build those trusting relationships. As a teacher at MHS, I can say that the most important resource community schools has provided is the feeling of belonging and not being alone. More of a comment. I'm not seeing other questions, but let me just scroll real quickly. We have 1 minute, maybe one last question if somebody has something.
I see one in the chat. I'll just throw this one out there.
Thank you.
I think this is for Dr. Quartz. What's the average number of years it takes to transform a school into a community school to reach the level of transformation of your UCLA community school sites?
That's a really great question and a tough one. I answered in the Q&A that, I feel like our school kind of hit its stride after 5 years and continues to grow in development. Are we at, social transformation is a long process. I don't think anyone ever gets there. So I would just, my advice is to know your community in the context. Everyone is different. Every community is different. And you're all building on different histories and sets of people and contexts. So I think it just really depends, even though depends is not a very satisfying answer.
All right, thank you. I think that's it for our questions. And right now it's about 11:40, so it's time for a quick break. We'll do about 5 minutes so that everyone can get up, stretch their legs, grab a snack, drink some water, run to the restroom real quick, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. I apologize for my voice. It seems like I may be going hoarse really quickly. Continuing with our theme today, we want to shift our focus to another integral pillar of community schools, and that's the integrated supports. As we've heard this morning and supported by the research presented in the last sessions, the community schools' local engagement with community supports creates opportunities to support students' success that are driven by the students and the communities. By bringing together the relationships and assets of a neighborhood, the community schools can efficiently and effectively leverage resources to advance and promote the well-being of children and their families, both now and in future generations. As we've heard, integrated supports are a key pillar of the work being done in our community schools. Related to the shared governance that the supports may vary from school to school, but are still driven by the collective input of the community, the students, staff, and leadership. Today, we've invited the Los Angeles County Department of Arts to share with us how they are actively collaborating with schools, including several of our community schools, to help healing and to expand learning opportunities by integrating the arts into schools. At this time, I want to introduce you to Ms. Elizabeth Nails, a program manager for creative well-being at the Department of Arts and Culture, as well as a co-chair of the LA Suicide Prevention Network's Youth Advisory Board. Her topic will highlight the work that her team has been doing with schools, and we'll also invite Hacienda and La Puente Unified to present on how integrating arts into the school district has supported their students in accessing a culturally responsive and healing-informed arts education. Please help me welcome Ms. Nails.
Thank you so much, Robert. Hello, everybody. I'm Elizabeth. I use she, her pronouns, and thank you on behalf of my colleagues and our many collaborating school districts, arts organizations, community and county partners. We are so excited and appreciative to join today's conversation, which has been really robust. And today we want to specifically focus on how to weave culturally relevant arts education supports into this really important conversation on collective healing. In LA County's regional blueprint for arts education, we unite around the vision that every young person in LA County engages in the arts all year, every year, because arts are fundamental to human growth and development. In partnership with Dr. Sean Ginwright and the Flourish Agenda, Arts and Culture has been learning from and engaging with the field around healing-centered arts practices. And I'll drop a link in a few moments into the chat to a series of trainings that Dr. Sean Ginwright's team at Flourish Agenda have led for the Arts Ed Collective on its karma principles, and I hope you'll check them out. Culturally relevant and healing-centered arts education nurtures all of these wonderful mental health protective factors, and not just for students, but for families and for all of the adults who are supporting young people inside and outside of school. And as Dr. Sean Ginwright illuminated, at all three levels, the arts can work at the individual, at the interpersonal, and at institutional for systemic change. So engaging in creative and cultural practices builds community connections, cultures of care, joy, purpose, possibility, and a sense of mattering, and also appreciation and inclusion for LA County's diverse spectrum of identities and cultures. So educators, you can tap into your radical creative imagination, integrate these art supports into districts' MTSS, into strategic arts plans, into crisis response plans, into LCAPs, and so much more. And our department's district team and the Arts Ed Collective are here to link you with resources and to support you on your journey. So I encourage you to visit our resource page to access a library of resources, and to also contact us if you need support. So I'll put those links in the chat. So today we want to feature 2 short sessions that demonstrate the power of integrating arts and supports, not only for young people, but for you, for the adults who play such a powerful role in creating a sense of safety, inclusion, and communities of well-being. So the first short session will feature a wonderful teaching artist, Marlene Beltran, who we've worked with closely in our creative well-being approach and is a member of the Arts for Healing and Justice Network. And Marlene will share some examples of culturally relevant arts activities that you could bring into your staff meetings, into your classrooms, and you can feel how they can foster a sense of support and inclusion. And following Marlene, we'll transition to an incredible team from Hacienda La Puente Unified to share about their process of integrating the arts with ethnic studies while nurturing a culture of care. So we at Arts and Culture are theater people, we're dance people, we're interaction people, and we love nothing more than connecting with our audience through the chat. So you are warmly invited to participate in both these sessions, to connect, to ask questions, to show some love. And you can practice that right now as I pass the mic over to Marlene. Thank you, Marlene, and I'll hand it off.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Really grateful to be in this space with all of you and listening to all of the wonderful work that you all are doing out in the communities. As Elizabeth mentioned, I am a teaching artist. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I've been a teaching artist now for about 20 years. I've been very much dedicated to serving the youth and communities through my art. As a singer, actress, director, and songwriter. And so I wanted to share a little bit about my identity. I do identify as a queer Chicana, born and raised in Los Angeles. My parents are Margarito and Magdalena Beltran. And what I wanted to share first is I wanted to get an opportunity to get to know you. I think that what we do when we step into these spaces with these youth and communities that we serve is really creating a space where people feel welcomed, where people feel safe. And I think the key to doing that is getting to know each other. So I am going to lead you through one of our cultural mapping exercises called I Love My People. And of course, this is being amended for us to be able to engage with this exercise online. But it is, you can find it in the Creative Wellness curriculum that I think Elizabeth will be sharing out. And in that curriculum, you will be able to see how to engage with that game when you are in person with youth and communities. But for today's purposes, I did want to see all of the wonderful people in this room and get to know you a little bit before we move forward. So this is called I Love My People. I'm going to ask you all, please, to answer or respond to this prompt. The prompt is, I love my people who, okay? And the most important thing about whatever you write is that it's true to you. I want you to make a statement that is true to you. I love my people who. So if you would please be so kind as to, in the chat, respond to the prompt, I love my people who. And so I'll go ahead and kick it off. See, I love my people who serve their community. And I'm seeing some people chime in here in the chat. I love my people who help others. Yes, I love my people who always have chocolate. I love my people who love to dance, who are kind, who love to sleep in on the weekends. I feel that. Who love their fur babies. I love it. So as you can see, all of these beautiful responses are coming in on the chat. And it gives us an opportunity to get to know each other, to get to know what our passions are, to get to know what we care about. People who find the humor in anything, yes, I love that. So as you can see, this exercise is meant to create points of connection for us gathered in the circle to be able to see the ways in which we reflect each other. And yes, to bring joy to our hearts, to be able to say, I love my people who laugh together and empower each other and feel like I can identify with that there's somebody else in this space that feels the way that I feel. And I think that for me, I love that. I love people who make me smile. I think for me, it's really key in terms of the cultural mapping and creating these spaces for us to share those things that bring us joy. But you know, these are coming in really fast, so I'm not able to read all of them. But I did want to say there's something else that is really critical to these safe spaces, these brave spaces that we're creating in our communities and in our schools, is that it's important to show up in the fullness of yourself, as your authentic self. And that will vary. You know, one day you might feel amazing and you come into the space and you share that light and that love. Another day you might be having a rough day, and you know what? That's okay. So within this exercise of I love my people, it is obviously bring all the love and bring all the joy, but sometimes people might want to share something a little bit more personal, something a little bit more sensitive, and that's okay. We don't have to. I encourage us in these safe spaces that we're creating that you don't have to wear a mask or hide behind something that you may not be feeling in a moment. So I just encourage you all, as you continue on this path and this work, to make space for all of it. Make space for the joy and make space for those parts of our heart that need healing, right? Because that's what we're here talking about. How do we heal each other? How do we heal ourselves? And so as you thank you for those of you that are reaching out in the chat. I just really, I feel like we as a community, we have a lot of healing to do, but it's these spaces that are being created to be expressive, to share all of it is necessary so that we can see the reflections of each other. We are reflections of each other. In LACOE is a Mayan philosophy that means you are my other me. And so as we do exercises like I love my people, we begin to see ourselves reflected in each other. And we feel connected, and we feel seen, and we feel valued. And so as these are rolling in, I know Elizabeth was going to help me create a Jamboard so that we can kind of see all of these. I know there's so many of you here, so I wanted to provide an opportunity also to share a song with you. Normally I would share this song with you, but today we've decided to share this song with you pre-recorded. And I mentioned to you all in LACOE, which is the Mayan philosophy that means you are my other me. I happen to belong to a group of women, poets and singers called in LACOE, and we're going to share a song called Love Song, which is appropriate in this moment because we're expressing our love for our people, our community, and this is what this song is about, and it's a Chicana native drum circle called in LACOE that we'll share. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that song. You can find this song on Spotify. The name of the group is LACOE, and we have a whole album out on Spotify. So if you connected to that song or to that energy, you can always find us on Spotify. The name of the group is LACOE. And so I thought that we could do some guided meditation together, because I find that along with connecting to each other and to the energy in the space, one of the things that I find useful in terms of creative well-being is this idea of abundance over scarcity. I think a lot of times we are taught to think that we're living in scarcity in our communities. We focus on what we don't have, as opposed to the richness of everything that our communities do have. And so I wanted to give us an opportunity to do a guided meditation on gratitude, on having gratitude for the abundance in our lives and for the beauty that does reside in our lives. And it could be as simple as being grateful for the sun coming up today, being grateful, as some of you expressed in your I love my people responses, for your fur babies, for your children, for the opportunity to serve your community. There's lots of things to be grateful for. And I find that when I'm struggling to find that balance in my life, and I give myself the opportunity to be grateful and offer that to the students and communities that we serve too, as a reminder of the abundance that is in our lives. So if you would please find a comfortable position. If you feel safe wherever you are, please close your eyes. We're just going to take a second to breathe together and meditate on gratitude. All right, so if you would please just take some deep breaths with me. Plant your feet on the ground if that's possible. To relax your shoulders and release any tension you might be feeling. And we're going to breathe together 3 times, taking a deep inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Deep breath in and out. And in and exhaling out. Now I want you to imagine that there are roots that are growing from the soles of your feet, that are connecting into the ground, into the earth. And as those roots are growing down into the earth, I also want you to imagine that there is a golden ray of light that is coming out of the top of your head, a golden ray of light that extends all the way past the building you're in, past the clouds, and you're out. This ray of light is shining all the way into the cosmos. So you're both connected to the earth that sustains us and gives us life, and reaching out into the stars and shining your light. You're going to take another deep breath in and out. Now I want you to place your hands, both of them, over your heart. And feel your heartbeat against your palm. Taking another deep breath in and exhale. I want you to think of at least one thing that you are grateful for today. One thing that you have gratitude in your heart for today. And we're going to take 3 more breaths together, and I want you to be thinking about what it is that you have gratitude for. And as we inhale and exhale, we're going to feel our heart swell up with this gratitude that we have. Taking a deep breath in and exhale and inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale. I want you to remember this feeling of gratitude and hold it close to you to remind you that we are abundant. Our communities are abundant. And carry this sense of gratitude with you as you walk forward in this day, in this week, in this life. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And I'm grateful for all of you and all of the work that you do. So thank you. I wanted to just really briefly, so I'm pretty sure, thank you. My time is about to end for today, but I wanted just to really quickly touch on a few things in regards to how to use these tools in the spaces that you inhabit. You know, as creating that safe space for your students and for your communities to feel seen, to feel valued, to be heard, to know that their points of view, their feelings are important. And also the importance of taking care of yourself, taking the time to have self-care in order so that you can continue to do this. Because as we know, it's very challenging, but very necessary. So in order to sustain ourselves and have the longevity that we need, we have to take care of ourselves. And so I hope that the guided meditation was helpful and that you can use that as a tool for yourself and offer it to your youth and communities that you serve, reminding ourselves of our abundance and not falling into the scarcity trap. I wanted to teach you a word in Nahuatl. So Nahuatl was one of the languages that was spoken in Mexico, and it's a word that means thank you. And so that word is Tlazocamatli, and that means thank you in Nahuatl. So I wanted to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for the amazing work that you do. And just wanted to share one last quote with you all before I pass it over back to Elizabeth. And that is, an affirmation. And if you would and could, wherever you are, repeat after me. I am a child of the universe, no less than the moon and the stars. I have a right to be here. I have a right to be me. Tlazokamati. I'm going to pass it over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Marlene, for sharing your wisdom, your care, your passion. Healing-centered artists like you have so much to offer our schools as they're building cultures of care and well-being. So thank you for sharing these tools with us. And I'd now like to help spotlight the Hacienda La Puente team. And I know they've built in an introduction, so I'm just going to get out of the way and welcome. Thank you for being here, Hacienda La Puente. We're bringing you up.
Thank you so much for having us. So we are Hacienda La Puente Unified School District, and we have our team of 5 here. Today, we're here to share with you our model for aligning arts and ethnic studies for collective healing. And so if we could go to the next slide, I would like to show you that this is who we are. But in an effort for us to be our authentic selves, we're not going to introduce ourselves individually. Instead, the question was posed about who we are and what brings us together. Because the 4 of us, if you read our descriptors, we are not typically aligned together. So what actually connects us is a perpetual curiosity, a yearning for learning. We approach our work with a hopeful and optimistic mind. So we assume the win, even though we know that this is not how the mainstream operates yet. We have a willingness to fail. We are willing to find comfort in the uncomfortable. And we all search for partnerships that align, because we cannot work in silos. So as individuals, we do important work, but as a collective, we have done really amazing work because our values align. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen, who's going to give you kind of an overview of what we'll talk about today.
So what you see here are the 3 different sections of what our presentation entails. We're going to start by grounding our work, just giving an overview of our framework and why it is that we're doing what we're doing. Then we'll go into how we've sort of put together our model of collective healing, and we'll take you through a little bit of our journey. And then last, we're going to just give some examples of how we are trying to help teachers, students, and community actually live the learning that we are trying to communicate, and then a few other of our next steps. As we go through this, we have lots of information to share, but sometimes, we won't be able to get to everything. We invite you to use the Padlet that is linked here. There's a bit.ly, and there's also the QR code that you're welcome to use. On this Padlet, you can add any questions that you have, any sort of aha moments. Those can go here under the spice rack. So we have questions and comments over here on the right. You'll have our contact information here in this blue section. So if you'd like to contact us, you have each of our areas of expertise, and then also our email. So feel free to contact us with any questions or thoughts that you have. And then if you would like to respond to this first question, we are interested in knowing, from your perspective, what does healing look like, feel like, or sound like? And as we go through our presentation, feel free to just go ahead and add anything that feels appropriate to you.
Hello, so I'm okay, I forgot to unmute there. I'm going to go over this slide called SPICE. And in Hacienda La Puente Unified, we have created our district's model for doing this work of ethnic studies and bringing art in terms of collective healing, but also to teach academic skills. So it works, this model works for both. You can see there's a tree there, and the roots of the tree are coming from two pedagogies. And one is called SPICE from ethnic studies, and one is 4 elements, and that comes from NPDL, which means new pedagogies of deep learning. So those are our foundational principles. Then there's the trunk of the tree, which is experiential learning. So we are highlighting that the importance of experience, because without experiential learning, we cannot get the outcomes that we need from students. And the outcomes are the 8 outcomes of ethnic studies and 6 competencies from the NPDL world, which are collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, citizenship, and character. Can you go back to the other slides? Thank you. I'm going to go over SPICE for now, which is the Ethnic Studies Foundational Framework. So S stands for shifting our lens from colonial and empire building bias from our curriculum and how we practice and how we teach. P is perspectives. So when we teach in the classroom, we want to make sure that we are valuing multiple perspectives and complexity of those perspectives. I is identities. So we are, encouraging adults and students, teachers and students, everybody to take that pride in their heritage and take pride in their identity, claim it, be proud of it. And C is for community. So our practice is community responsive, cultural responsive, and that has to do with the community school initiative as well. So that is included in this work as well. And then E is working for equity and justice, which to me, to us, really to our team, that is the main outcome of education. So that is SPICE, and you'll hear, others of us in the team refer to SPICE, and we wanted to introduce that to you as well.
So building on that framework of SPICE and the 4, I just realized I didn't unmute. So building on that foundation of SPICE and the 4 elements of NPDL, once students have gone through the process of experiencing their learning, going through that experiential learning, the outcomes that we would like them to master to master are these 6 competencies that you see here. These come from new pedagogies for deep learning. And then you can see the 8 outcomes of ethnic studies. These actually come from the model curriculum that was drafted through the California Department of Education.
And so now you see our arts and SEL, which is where we are working to combine our efforts. This is where the healing comes in, because prevalent teaching methods do not include experiential learning. And this is where healing is needed, and arts fill the gap. So arts return us to the cognitive approaches of learning where experience precedes textbooks. And what that basically means is it gives us a lived experience. We can do the work before learning about the work. And this is something that all of us are really clued into, because we cannot separate art and culture. They are intertwined. And to really connect with students, we feel that arts is the way in. Arts is the way for us to connect to them and engage in that healing. And so we have all of these statements about what the arts do. You might have other ideas about what the arts do, and we would encourage you to add that to our Padlet. But these are just some that we came up with, and this is what we threw around the room a little bit, and how we engage with students with arts, SEL, and ethnic studies. And so, Lisa, if you'd like to come on and tell us about the who and what we're doing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Megan. So we talk a lot about our why, our who, our what, and how this is all happening. And I'm going to share with you our who, our students, our educators, and our community at large. So I'm going to start with students first. With our students, we want our students to experience autonomy, because that builds so many social emotional skills. We also build experiences where students are validated, they're seen, they're heard, they are given the opportunity to express with their voices and make choices of their own. We want them to have agency, and all of these things help to build on the social emotional competencies. With our educators, we want to do something similar. We want to make sure that our educators understand that they're culture builders, that they are designers, facilitators, and pathfinders. And in this way, they have autonomy and agency as well. This empowers them. And we also encourage them to embrace self and teach beyond the walls. For our community, we want to counter misconceptions first about ethnic studies and about students in general, that we hear a lot of talk, unfortunately, still through the media out in our communities. And for some of our educators, my students can't, or those students can't. And we want to break down those misconceptions with our work. We want to work with our community partners as well, both within our district and outside of our district, to work with our parents and guardians to co-create and collaborate on artwork. And we provide experiences for that in the after school hours, so that our families are experiencing the collective healing magic of the arts as well. And so I'm going to encourage you, if you had any thoughts on that, to enter those into the Padlet. And I am going to introduce or turn it over to Megan.
So this next slide that you see is a graphic that we have created. You're not muted.
Oh,
sorry, technology. This is a graphic that we have created that shows how we work through this process. We were sitting one day and basically trying to come up with what is the process that we use in order to look at these new ideas, in order to discover this new way of thinking. And we respectfully ask that you don't take screenshots, because this is still an evolving chart. But we call this our choreography of vision, because we want to use artistic language. We found that a lot of language lives in sciences, math, and we wanted to bring forth some new language that is more artistic in nature, because that is where we live a lot of the time. And so in order to start on this journey, you have to have an awareness. You have to be aware that there's even a need for change. So that's awareness. With that awareness comes with grappling with internal conflict. This is where you are placing these new ideas in your body and thinking, where do I sit in this? How does this align or not align with my values? And with that comes a shift. There will be some shift into a new direction. And so with the shift, then we are finding intersections. Well, how does this new idea and my old ideas or myself or my identity, how do they align? And how do I make this work? So now you start to explore, what can I do? Where can I go? What can I try? What ideas can we throw out there? We do this a lot in our office. And then that helps us establish our footing. How are we standing on this? What are we doing? Oh, I'm sorry. They're saying mind the mic. My mic is moving around a lot. How are we establishing our footing? So what is our basis? What is our foundation? Where are we moving from? And that gives us orientation. So this is now we have a foundation that we can now move and pivot into directions to help us further view many viewpoints, change our lenses. And then when we are creating movement and flow, that is us putting it out into the community, out to our students. And when we are moving through that experimentation, bringing other voices into it, we gain clarity about what it is that we're doing, why this is important, why it doesn't work. And that then helps us identify the gaps, and that brings new awareness, and around we go. And you notice that in the middle, there's a vision. This is what Lisa just talked about, the why. Why are we doing this? Well, for us, that healing is where that lives in the vision space. And we are going around and round trying to figure out how we can further that healing. One thing just to note is that we feel that we are somewhere between the orientation and clarity space right now. We haven't yet identified the gaps. We're still trying to create movement and flow. We're still trying to put out there these ideas. We haven't collected data yet. We're starting to see some information roll in, but we still have more work to do. So we haven't even completed a full cycle in our own picture here. And next, sorry. So now I would like to bring on Dr. Cunningham, who is going to talk to you about the journey and how we got here.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'd like to set the scene and the stage for how did we get to this point? It has been almost a decade in the making of building the team and bringing the right people to lean in and share with others and lead professional development and go further with our vision. Our theme for the last 9 years has been, let's give them something to talk about. And we've definitely been doing that with the arts. So I came aboard in 2014, and at that time, I was able to hire 2 full-time VAPA-TOSAs, made all the difference in the world with the right background, the right credentialing, and through LACOE's CEDAL team, the Center for Distance Online Learning, we were able to be one of the 2 first TEAL pilot districts. And over the years, and we still continue with TEAL, we have learned about all of the discrete art disciplines, and we have been able to bring the arts, even though TEAL is up through 6th grade, but we've done it P12. And we started integrating the arts with technology across all grade levels and content in our district-wide PD. We began writing arts advancement grants, which more than doubled our little amount of funding that we get for our department. And it really helps. We had our TOSAs, our teachers on special assignment model lessons, and we brought in MTSS and SEL, the social emotional, because adults need that as well as students. And our annual district art showcase, when we had school closures with distance learning, we pivoted and we had those pivotal practices where we went online and we had a global art show and had people from across the world viewing and observing and appreciating the artwork and talent, innovation, and creation of our students preschool through 12th grade. With our VAPA PDs, we do share discrete art strategies and build upon language and social emotional learning with the ELD standards and frameworks, as well as our ELA standards and frameworks with literacy and writing across the curriculum. And we even had some summer VAPA camps. And I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa to tell you a little more of our story.
Hi there. So after our VAPA camps, we implemented these VAPA camps at individual school sites that requested them. Teachers who had attended our district-wide VAPA camps went back to their administrators and said, "Hey, we want this for our site," which was wonderful because then we had fidelity across the entire site. And we had about 5 schools in our district that did that, and we continue to work with them. We also were very fortunate to be part of the Scale Up grant with SEL and MTSS components, and that was just building on our work and building the momentum. We keep talking about the momentum of this VAPA wave that's washing across our schools in the district. As part of the National Telegrant with LACOE CEDAL, our 5th grade students were very fortunate to be part of the Conga Kids instruction, where students learned social dance and built their social emotional learning through that through the component of, or through the discipline of dance. Our students at the teleschools were also able to participate in classroom trainings or lessons with 24th Street Theater teaching artists, and they got to go to 24th Street Theater to view the show and learn more about theater in action. We also had teaching artists through Tela, and we used the Teal and Tela models, and we integrated language development across all of these arts lessons, because Tela stands for Teaching English Language Through the Arts. And we had 2 pilot schools with this, but we rolled all of that learning out to the other schools in the district at PD. So, and anytime this team is learning something for something specific, we roll it out and expand it and share it with all of our schools, because if it's good for one school, it's good for them all. We also started integrating the arts across the new pedagogies for deep learning in our implementation year. When everyone was getting started and getting their feet on the ground, we weren't exactly part of it, but in the second year, when schools were digging in and building their new pedagogies for deep learning units, they asked the Vapotosas to come in and help them to write model lessons that would build on that. We also have our framework for integrating the ethnic studies lens and including that in all of our VAPA PDs. We've brought Youth Cinema Project and Social Justice Real World learning to the district. We have Schoolyard Rap, and we're putting together our plan for AB 181 and for Proposition 28. And I'm going to turn over to Dr. Cunningham.
So in order to do all of these things, you have to have the right people that are the right fit for the right positions. And we had a lot of responses to initiatives for this last school year, including this year. We worked for a couple of years with LACOE, with Michelle Herzog, and different districts hearing their stories about ethnic studies. And our district passed a resolution last spring. New Pedagogies for Deep Learning became a district-wide initiative this school year, 5 years in the making, where cohorts of schools started working on deep learning. And this year we had Dr. Deere. I was able to hire her and add her to our team as an for ethnic studies. And technology, we have Tech-TOSAs, and Jen is our Tech-TOSA that also specializes in new pedagogies for deep learning, where we create locally and share globally. We're part of a worldwide group of educators learning with people like Michael Fullen, Max Drummy, and Joanne Quinn. Very exciting. And we got to add a second Vapatosa back in the mix because of all of these different programs, and that is Megan. So I am fortunate to work with these incredible teacher leaders that bring something new to the table, and having the right people in the right place makes the right impact.
Thank you, Dr. C. And so I'm going to go over SPICE again, but with a different conversation about it. You can see there is our choreography of vision circle. And so SPICE sits somewhere, but before that, what Dr. C and what Lisa were explaining, that sat in the places where shifts and explorations were happening. SPICE is what's giving us an orientation. That is our footing. That's where we can refer to it, and we can actually assess what's coming our way. Does it meet the criteria? So SPICE also works as a criteria for us, a foundational criteria. So we are at that orientation place, and we're working toward clarity, like Megan was saying earlier. But to add to that, I think our work is also, it's doing more than just academic skill building, SEL, artistic healing, but what it's doing is it's transforming our space at the institutional level. And that is an important work that's happening, because a lot of time we address it at maybe individual teacher level, or maybe at the school site level, but I think this work is happening at the institution level. That's been the most powerful thing to see. And that has a lot to do with how we work as a team. Also looking at, referring back to this morning's presentation, the Dr. Jinwright, he talked about 4 pivots. And I really feel, and my team can maybe look at it differently, but my lens would be, we're definitely sitting at the second and third pivot that he was talking about, which is we're going from transactional to transformational. And also we're looking at possibilities and dreaming about our work. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this to Jen.
So one of the things that we're doing in order to sort of move this framework forward and use this model to really transform, what we're doing with teachers and students, from a teacher standpoint, we are trying to empower teachers, not just as implementers of curriculum, but as those that actually build the culture in their classroom and with their students, designing learning experiences and designing how the students are going to interact with each other. As a pathfinder, knowing where our students are and where we want them to go and figuring out how we're going to get them there. And then all together as a facilitator of all of the activity that happens both in the classroom and making that connection to family and to community also. So this is kind of the direction that we're going in terms of supporting teachers' movement in understanding this connection of how important ethnic studies and students' well-being really is to education.
And so now what you're seeing is a list essentially of the different lessons that we have done this year alone. They're varied and they live in a lot of different places as far as discipline. So up in the top left-hand corner, you see that we've worked with IB, and this was artistically minded in creation, but it was for an IB literature class that was needed a lot of cultural relevance and a cultural background. And so Dr. Deere and I worked on this hand in hand with the IB teacher and created this unit that brought in so much background and culture, because in order to understand that poetry, which was a work in translation, they had to have cultural background to link it to, but also a personal connection in some way. And so we had to do a lot of work to really connect the students to that particular literature. And then if you look, we've also done the different heritage months. With Native American Heritage Month, we did digital portraits. Again, this was something where they took the poem, I Am California, California is Me, and we had them look at it, respond to it, and then design their faces with an I am statement digitally to create a digital art piece that was a reflection of themselves. And then it was a connection, obviously, to the celebration. And then I have another one. I can't see where it is, but you can see all of these different lessons that we've created are all based with the idea of having students feel seen, giving them the opportunity to put themselves into the work, and also giving them some cultural understanding of other people. So we are trying to really make a comprehensive look when we are doing this art and ethnic studies and SEL combination and alignment. Did my audio go out? Can you hear me, Geraldine? You can hear me?
We're getting some cool. Yes. And I'm going to wrap it up for our team. What are our next steps? We decided it was to live it, love it, and launch it. So with our educators, we're going to continue modeling and supporting them as they design experiential learning across all grade levels and across all content. We also want to, with our students, we want to continue supporting students as they experience these concepts and create deeper connections and develop empathy and resilience because of them. With our community, we want to continue to engage and to expand that engagement with the community in lived learning experiences so that the community and parents and guardians have an understanding of the value of more human-centered learning. And then with our humanities team, us, we're going to start with us. We are going to obviously continue digging deep, learning about cultural relevance, and be authentic as we align the arts, ethnic studies, NPDL, and everything else that we've talked about today. So because we want to model the way, and we also want to move towards identifying the gaps so that we can expand the model and influence the paradigm shifts that we're looking for as outcomes. So I think this is the end. This is the end of our presentation. Do we have time for questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you so much to you and your team for all the work you're doing. We do have about 5 minutes for questions. So I actually don't see any yet, but we have time for questions. So if you have questions, please enter them in the chat so that our team here can answer. As people are trying
There is one question on the Padlet, actually.
Okay.
So the question was, how have students responded to the model? What shifts have you seen in their sense of belonging, pride, and ownership?
I'm going to let mitosis talk about the students, but I want to make sure to express how much the teachers have felt more freedom to add the arts and to make sure to go across content and curriculum. They're like, wow, we can do this, and we talk about the importance of SEL and the arts across content. And then for the student piece team, take it away.
I'll speak to that a little bit. We have seen students engage with arts who never thought to engage with arts other than for art's sake. And so we get a lot of responses about, oh, this connects to this. We get a lot of responses from students who are then furthering connections outside of art, outside of the subject matter we're talking about. They will come up to us with these ideas that they came up with because of an art project that we've worked on. Sometimes they align, sometimes they don't. So we're seeing this new thinking of inspiration and then tapping into their success. With the SEL piece, we hear a lot of students tell us, oh, this is relaxing. But then we allow them space to say, oh, this was so stressful. This is really hard. And we use that opportunity to tell them, we can do hard things. This is okay if it's hard, it's brand new. So we use that as a support system as well. And we've seen their relief that we're allowing them to be okay with the fact that this is hard.
And I think also I can add, as far as teachers are concerned, that power that Megan is just shared, it also is coming from because teachers are feeling empowered. And like Dr. C was saying, that the trainings have been well received by admins, school sites, and the teachers. And they're really finding concrete ways to take what they used to do into the conceptual, higher level thinking place as well. And one of the schools actually shared that because the higher level concept was building civilization, the science teacher was working on that, as well as the ELA teacher was working on the similar concept. The students were integrating knowledge from the two subject areas, which teachers didn't even know was happening. So that is the power of this work, that students are on their own connecting the dots. And teachers are realizing after the fact that their students are actually starting to connect those dots, which is, to me, is gorgeous.
And if we make this subject material relevant to the lives of our students, then they feel connected and the learning goes beyond just today's lesson into their lives.
Thank you. I'm going to read a few comments. I still don't see questions, but we have a little bit of time. One of the comments that I really enjoyed is that this was a takeaway for me as well, is it says, what a beautiful reframe of the roles teachers hold: cultural builders, designers, facilitators, and pathfinders. I too really love the idea of that. It's great. There was one more I wanted to share. Thank you so much to Hacienda La Puente Unified Team. This is really inspiring work. We appreciate you sharing about your journey. That was from Elizabeth. So I wanted to share that. No more questions. We have a few more minutes if we can. I think we also, someone asked about the recording. We will be sending that out. So you'll get access to the recording to all of this. It'll be available to all the attendees. And if we have no more questions, we want to thank you, team, for being here. I really appreciate all that you shared and the work that you're doing. Great work, great work. It's really great to see leaders in the field. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. All right, Dr. Bird.
Yes, again, my thanks as well. It was a very inspiring presentation. As everyone knows who's ever put together a conference or a symposium, it doesn't happen, without a lot of input from dedicated people who are trying to share information and collaborate with our partners. On the DMH side, I want to take a second to thank Geraldine Gomez, Justine January, our fearless leader, Conchana Tate, or Conchi Tate, Rebecca Hurtado, who was great at keeping me on track today, and Rosa Isela Lopez Cruz, for all of the work that they put in on pulling this together and herding the proverbial cats to get to this great product. And Dr. Dickerson.
Yeah, and I'll also thank you all, and then also our team too here at LACOE, Alan and your tech team, Bruce, Diana, Dr. Yao, Dr. Selena Bajas Ledesma, you as well. We want to take some time, thank you for all of the work that you guys have put in behind the scenes and in front scenes as well. So I want to thank you all. And as we really draw this event to a close, we want to greatly appreciate your feedback. So we want you to take time to either scan the QR code and fill out the survey, but we'll also drop the link so that you can click the link and fill the survey out as well. Your thoughts are important to us as we value the opportunity to improve our event. We'll hang on, we'll be around until, a couple minutes if you have any questions for us. One thing I do want to share is as you fill out the survey, a little note from Dr. Jenwright, right? Speak from your heart. Make sure you let us know what it is you feel. Your thoughts are also important to us. So please take that time to fill out the survey. We really, really take a look at that and hope to improve for the next time. So with that, I want to thank you all again. Oh, I think I forgot to mention Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, I want to thank you too. If you're still on here, thank you also, Dr. Smith, on our team. With that, I hope you all have a great day. Please practice self-care, grab some bubbles, do some breathing. Fun. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you for joining us. At this time, the webinar has concluded. You may disconnect.